OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
Yep, Tuesday the 15th of November 2022, and very good morning to OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Myself and Kathleen this morning. Good morning, Kathleen McNamee.
Good morning, Shane. How are you doing?
Keeping well. I mean, the back pages are just dominated by one man, Cristiano Ronaldo.
I'm shocked. I thought we'd all have gotten over this by now.
This is just good. And it's going to drag on. Like the way the Piers Morgan guys have decided to release this Wednesday.
But they know exactly what they're doing as well, because they know they have absolute gold. And even if they put out like the best stuff on Sunday evening, everyone's going to be tuned in. Like, I've no interest in Ronaldo whatsoever. I never do. And I actually hate myself that every time I see a clip come up, I'm like, is there something new in this?
I gotta watch it. Every clip that comes up, and it's drip feeding. It is like little, like you're following TalkSport on their social media last night, and there's just tiny little clips coming up every now and again. He's like, oh, what's he talking about now?
And literally everyone has something to say on it as well. That's the thing. Like, ex-players are coming out of the woodwork to talk about it. You have the reaction of like the Wayne Rooneys and the Gary Nevilles that he was talking about. You have the player reactions, which we saw the video with Bruno Fernandes. I mean, this is the best part of it yet. This is what I want to know, your reaction to this because as a United man, you must. So
you'll see the video playing as we're talking here, but just as they met up for Portugal duty, the little awkward moment where Bruno comes up behind Cristiano Ronaldo, pats him in the back. Ronaldo almost is preempting. He knows it's Bruno Fernandes, turns around immediately, is shaking his hand. Bruno obviously says something to him.
And it's not even a proper shake. It's like that, you know, that limp fish handshake that you get where someone kind of
look at the turn. He turns around a second time. That's the moment where I'm like, what did Bruno Fernandes say to Cristiano Ronaldo there?
And what was he thinking as well? Because he probably walked in, he was walking up to the dressing room knowing he was going to see him.
100%.
Saw his back turned. Yeah. And like Ronaldo seemed to be at his little like cubby hole or whatever beside Fernandes. So
they'll have both been thinking about what they were going to say in that moment, because Bruno Fernandes is, oh look, it's frosty.
It gets worse every time I see it.
So frosty. Like the handshake from Ronaldo, and then Bruno obviously says something enough for Ronaldo to rebut and say, essentially he looks like he's saying, what did you say?
Yeah. And
Bruno turned around again, and he looks like he's repeated what he said the first time, like just to hammer it home. Like, he's obviously a Portuguese teammate of his, but Diogo Dalot, I know, is someone who's quite close to Ronaldo in that United squad, going over to his house for dinner and that sort of thing. He'd be a closer friend than Bruno Fernandes might be. Bruno's a United loyal, you know, he's worn that captain's armband, so I don't think he'll have appreciated the way in which Ronaldo has conducted himself.
Because the team only learned about it, what was it, when they were flying back after the game?
Yeah, after the Fulham match, essentially. Which, I mean, again, takes the headlines away from what should have been a positive 24 hours for United. They've got to win.
Raging if you're a Garnacho as well. Because like, this week everyone should be talking about him and having the Ronaldo comparisons and being like, oh, isn't he brilliant? And instead it's all this rubbish.
It's just ridiculous. He has disgraced himself, Ronaldo, and the only people now defending him really are Graham Souness and the Ronaldo fanboys. And that's there are a lot of those. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of those, but they're not necessarily Manchester United fans. They're CR7 fans. Yeah, do you know that they're just into the man as opposed to the club? Like, and I was just reading, like I mentioned it before I came on air to yourself, like Graham Souness comments in the Mail. So United sent mixed messages, so I do have sympathy for him, and like, I don't know where Graham is getting his opinions from at the minute, but like,
nowhere good is all I can say.
It's just not good. He's like, United 2-0 up home to Tottenham, and he asks him to go on with a few minutes remaining. What does he want in 2 minutes? I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, if a manager wants to bring a player on for 2 minutes or 20 minutes or an entire game, that's his prerogative. He's the manager.
And it's the player's prerogative after the match to go to the manager and be like, hey, you put me on for 2 minutes, I was a bit upset about that, or whatever it is. Grand. But like, don't
come on.
The thing that got me about the video was honestly the part where he started like giving off about the chefs and that they hadn't changed since he was there when he was 20. And I was like, does that not show like a good legacy in a club
100%.
That they keep people, and fair enough, maybe.
A bit of loyalty which Ronaldo could learn about. Jesus.
Like, fair enough, you might want to update the menu or whatever it is, but like, that's not the chef's fault. Like, that's someone going to the chefs and saying,
honestly,
hey, we're going to try out some new nutritional food or whatever it is.
Picking out little things like that. And he goes, the player took his punishment after refusing to come on against Tottenham. He was consigned to the development squad where his conduct was exemplary. How do you know? You're not in there. Like, you're not in Carrington. Like, Graham Souness doesn't have a clue here. look, I know he's trying to stay firm in his Ronaldo defence, because he's at least being consistent. He's always been defensive of Ronaldo. Rio Ferdinand was on his podcast yesterday, and even he was saying, I can't defend this.
I saw he was having a bit of, I don't even know if it was beef with Carrier on Twitter as well.
Trying to get him on as well.
Which actually it would have been interesting, in fairness.
It's just... And look, every single columnist and every single person who has an opinion on sport or football, this is in the news headlines. Columnists who don't write about sport or football or even care who Cristiano Ronaldo is are writing about him today.
But even we're both saying that we're so tired of it, yet so interested. We spent the first 5 minutes of the show and we're still.
But we have to. It's all up. Any of my mates who are into football or sport, it's all they're talking about.
Oh, even most of my friends aren't into football at all. Couldn't care less about sport, and I've never had so many messages of people being "What's going on? This seems really ridiculous. Are we right in saying that this is ridiculous?" And I'm like, yes, no, you are.
His only the only views I think that and some United fans will acknowledge and be glad that he's come out and been critical of the Glazers. But it's quite damaging for your multi-million-pound star to have come out and said this about But
the funny thing is, because of the way he's gone about it, it actually hasn't been that damaging to the Glazers. He could have really got in on the Glazers and really took them to task, and the fans would have got behind him, and maybe there would have been some changes around United. But because of the way he's done it, no one's talking about the Glazers. No one's talking about all the issues that there actually are at United.
If he'd just come out and done a 10-minute interview on the Glazers and why they're a cancerous thing for United, then that people would be like, okay, understandable. But he's just thrown the boot in. When you're talking about the chefs and you're talking about Ten Hag and you're just picking on every little thing at the club that you don't like. I don't know. It's the whole thing is just...
Even Rangnick being I didn't know who he was. I had no respect for him. Rangnick was a fairly well-known name. How do you not know who he is?
Well, he took Schalke to a Champions League semi-final, did he not?
Yeah.
I mean, Ronaldo has really hit the self-destruct button in a really bizarre way. And look, it's obvious that he wants out. I think he'll come back to United after the World Cup. It's going to be a really, really awkward...
I would love to be a little fly on the wall in that dressing room when he walks in the door.
It won't last long. It won't, whether he plays for United again, I don't know.
But that's the thing, does Ten Hag let him back in the dressing room? What do you do in that situation?
It's got to be a power play. You can't have someone in the dressing room who's doing interviews like this saying he's no respect for the manager. No respect for the manager. I mean, of all things to be saying, you cannot come out saying this sort of stuff. I don't know, and it is kind of sad because United fans will have been buzzing after that Fulham game, after the World Cup, with 3 points against a really informed Fulham team. Garnacho, an
exciting young superstar, possibly 100%. In the making.
Yeah,
whatever narrative you want to put on it.
So much to be excited about. He's calling United a marketing club, and the Glazers don't care about the club. All of which United fans will agree with. I think
absolutely.
That's fine. But Jimmy Carragher's made the point that he wants to be sacked at this stage by United, and he's doing everything within his power to be sacked. I just don't know if it tarnishes his legacy. Look, the 03 to 09 version of Ronaldo at United was special, and United fans will always have that, but I think it certainly tarnished it.
Oh yeah, it's going to be hard. I'm one of those people, as I said before, I've never liked Ronaldo. I've never liked the legacy that he has had. I can totally accept that he's a brilliant footballer, but as a human, I've had my questions. This only adds to it in my eyes, and I just don't understand what his play is, because I understand that he wants to get fired from United. That's very, very obvious. But what club is going to want him now?
It's a fair point.
It has to be a lower level club. You're not going to go to one of the big clubs with all these big personalities, big managers, unless there's someone out there that he gets on really well with.
Yeah.
And it's very clear already that that's not the case, because if that was the case, he would have been snapped up during the summer. United have already said we wanted to let him go, but we couldn't find anyone to take him that was happy. So is he just planning to go to China or Saudi or somewhere like that and get his money? But his ego doesn't want that either.
No.
He wants European football.
All the back page of the Irish Daily Mail saying United moved to Dumpstar and Bayern could offer him way out. Rumours that George Mendes, his agent, met officials from Bayern Munich last week. I don't know if Bayern want anywhere near this guy. I don't know who would want anywhere near him at the minute, as you say. It's just he's a ticking time bomb, and he's just.
Unless you get some sort of promise from him that he comes in and he's like, oh, this place is so much better than United.
Yeah.
Like, the chefs are great.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Like, I almost feel he's getting frustrated. Like, he can't do on the pitch what he used to be able to do. And I almost feel like there's maybe an element of him that's frustrated at that and taking his frustrations out on everything but himself. He can't accept that he's not the player he was.
Yeah. Because
his ego is too big. Like, this guy has one of the biggest egos in world sport.
And he can't accept that he's not being treated that way as well.
Yeah, 100%.
That his legacy, like, because I think in his head, he still thinks he's good enough. And also the fact that Ten Hag isn't just succumbing to him and being like, oh, of course I'll play you in every game and I'll have you starting in every match, and maybe not like a cup game or whatever, but sure, Ronaldo, you know yourself that we're resting you for those games.
100%.
He's upset that there's a manager actually kind of fighting back against him.
It's madness. And he can't understand that pundits like Gary Neville and Rio Ferdinand and these guys who played with him and shared dressing rooms with him would ever criticise him. He doesn't realise they are pundits. They have to have opinions, and they're allowed to have the opinion that Ronaldo hasn't been good for United or hasn't been the player that he should have been for United this season. Like, they're allowed to have the. And
they definitely could have gone a lot harder on him as well. Like, I think they probably have held back at times because
they played with him.
Because they played with him.
Some comments coming in from this as well. Noel said, "Is Shane personal friends with Fernandes? Why call him Bruno? No, I'm not personal friends with Bruno Fernandes. Apologies. We're calling him Ronaldo. Doesn't mean I know Cristiano Ronaldo, the man. Just everyone calls him Bruno." You know who I'm talking about.
You wish you were personal friends with Bruno.
Of course
I
do. I'm not talking about Bruno Mars. We're talking about Ronaldo here. So it's clearly Bruno Fernandes I'm mentioning. No, we're not personal friends. I think a lot of good can come from the Ronaldo interview, says John. He's no longer a problem for Ten Hag, and he did a 2-footed tackle on the Glazers on the way out the door. In fairness, that's the one good thing that Ten Hag's position here. Like, Ten Hag will be looking at this going, you're making a fool out of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you're digging your own grave here. You're just anyone who is maybe on the fence about Eric Ten Hag because of the whole Ronaldo situation and the way he dealt with the Spurs thing, and the way he's going to have to deal with this. I mean, it's perfect timing for Ten Hag because there's no matches, so he doesn't have to do these post-match interviews. He doesn't have to speak for if he doesn't want to, I assume, until after the World Cup.
I can't wait for like 10, 20 years time, however long it is, that Ten Hag releases a book that has a chapter on all this.
Ridiculous.
Because I want to know, like, why make Ronaldo captain? Why give him the 2 minutes off the bench? Why not start him in certain games? Like, what were the things going on? Because there were clearly stuff going on at different stages that made him do that. And I'm like, what are the reasons? I want to know.
Yeah.
You can play this clip back in like 20 years.
Exactly, yeah.
Kathleen sitting here with the book just being like, I'm ready, guys.
Yeah, here we go. We'll both be older and wiser. Jim Sullivan, imagine if they had a camera inside that hotel in Saipan 02. It's similar vibes. Like, to see that handshake between Bruno and Ronaldo last night was just wonderful. Now maybe there's lip readers out there, Portuguese lip readers, who can find out what they were saying.
Fernandes has gone up in my estimations a lot in the last week. Like, the stuff he said about the World Cup.
He was very honest after the Fulham game, yeah.
Very, very honest. Not someone I expected to come from. No, I had no reason to base that off. I just had never really seen him talk about that sort of. And then the handshake with Ronaldo was just
like he gets a bad image even during the Fulham game, like, or during the Villa game in the Carabao Cup, kind of running into a Villa defender, and he tries to not feign injury, but win penalties, and when he fouls, so he rubs himself up the wrong way with opposition.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of his interviews and stuff, and even the Garnacho stuff, or he kind of was critical of him and his behaviour in pre-season. I think that was Bruno's way of
kind of give him a bit of a kick.
100%. He knows
like
Garnacho.
A caring kick.
Yeah, you could even see when they were celebrating the winner. Bruno was like pushing him and like pointing at him, like, yeah, this is what we want.
Yeah.
Like, he's clearly a leader in the dressing room, Bruno Fernandes, and he's stepping up to the plate. I mean, the whole Ronaldo stuff is going to put him up in estimations of United fans massively, I would imagine. Anthony Ryan says, good to see the millennials in charge after that couple of baby boomers yesterday. That's a very fair point.
We're honoured.
When are you a millennial? You're a millennial.
It's my birthday next week.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
You'll be back on between.
And then
26.
I'm on the wrong side of the 20s.
Yeah, you can still say mid-20s, but that's
mid
the
to
scary
late.
one. Mid to late.
Yeah.
When does it become late 20s? Well, I'm 29, so I'm definitely.
I feel like 27, 28 is when it all.
Yeah, okay, so Cameron says we're both too old for Leonardo DiCaprio now, which is a very fair point.
Damn it. I think it's. Did we not work out that you weren't a millennial, or that you?
Yeah, I think it's from 95 on is a millennial. Is it? Is that right?
I'm 96.
You're 96. You're in a different bracket than me.
Yeah.
I don't know what one I am. No, I'm a millennial. You're something else.
I'm Gen.
You're Gen Z. You're Gen Z. Jesus, right.
We take the compliment either way.
Either way,
we'll take it.
You're telling us we're young, so
no
thank
offense,
you.
yes.
I just like there's a lot of people coming in with comments on this. Super Ken says, been a United fan all my life. This doesn't tarnish his legacy, in my opinion, at all. The fans are just disappointed. Time heals all. I don't know about that. I think the way in which you conduct yourself at the end.
I do think it does tarnish. It does depend kind of what happens from here, I suppose, to a certain extent. And maybe this is a massive storm and it all blows over really quickly. But
doesn't feel like that, though.
No, it doesn't. But I think for some fans, it's like you say, the people who hold Ronaldo close and everything he did with the United, they are going to
the ones with the Ronaldo posters in their 40-year-old bedrooms, you know, that's the ones that are really upset about this. Alan Drill says, my 8-year-old daughter and pals are talking about Ronaldo. Hope he never sets foot in Old Trafford again. Eric Ten Hag will leave United to glory. That's a fair one. Like, everyone is talking about this. Like, it's just, the schools are back at the minute. The schools are in, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like, this is, I can imagine if this happened when I was in primary school, it is the talk of the playground.
Oh yeah, completely.
Everyone's like, Ronaldo this, Ronaldo that.
That's the thing, like, it's people who aren't even interested in football are talking about it. Because Ronaldo is one of those sports figures that transcends just sport. And everyone knows who he is. And even stuff like his wife having the Netflix show and different things, you know, he transcends all that. So it doesn't matter whether you're interested in sport or not. This is just an interesting, because this is gossip. Like, it's literally schoolyard gossip of
what it is.
What's happening in the training ground.
Because we don't really know, and Ronaldo's made that point as well, and that's why he's been critical about some of the punditry, that they don't know what's going on in the dressing room. They actually don't have a clue, which is, I get that part. Like, none of us really know what's happening, but you can kind of tell. You can kind of tell who owns the dressing room, and right now it's not Cristiano Ronaldo.
No.
Like, you can't get in there. Another great story in the back pages as well, and we'll come back to some of those Ronaldo comments because they're still coming in, and undoubtedly it's something that we're going to have to keep talking about. Crosstown Ashton United, 11th in the Northern Premier League, so this is a non-league team, have applied to bring Haaland on loan. So, part-timers, Ashton United, revealed their latest loan target is Erling Haaland. So with Norway, of course, failing to qualify for Qatar, the Premier League's leading scorer might not play competitive football again until just before Christmas. Ashton confirming yesterday on Twitter, now it's a PR move. It's a marketing
completely is.
Stunt, but I mean, I love it. So they've submitted a 28-day loan bid to City. Their boss, Michael Clegg, hinted they're weighing up an approach. He says, it just makes sense. City aren't playing and we want to help by keeping Erling fit. It makes more sense than him playing golf for 6 weeks. We think he'll be a great fit for us, and he would slot in with our squad dynamic really well. So Ashton's Hurst Cross Stadium, which is a capacity of 4,500, is about 6 miles from the 54,500 seat Etihad. So they've 8 fixtures scheduled, Ashton, before he's needed again.
Keep Erling fit. Playing against Ireland on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, that was disappointing for anyone who's bought a ticket for Republic of Ireland against Norway. Look, you can still go to the game. It'll still be a good fixture, and the FAI will no doubt want tickets to still fly out the door. But
it's still a great team, in fairness. Like, it'll be a good game to go to. But I never really get these. Like, I know it's a social media ploy, and it kind of gets you a bit of attention for 24 hours, but I don't. Is it in the vague hope that even Haaland might just turn up at the ground and be like, this is funny, I'll just do a day's training here?
Or Pep could land down for a session over Christmas or something, you know, like. Yeah, I'm sure they'll get something out of it. If nothing else, they're getting publicity.
That's true.
Maybe people around Ashton, the Ashton area, who didn't even realise there was a Premier League North club or National League North club. Like, maybe it does something for them. I don't know. Gavin Mizuno in the back page of the papers as well. Can't wait to get stuck into France and the Netherlands. You keep forgetting that we're actually in the group with France and Holland for the World Cup. It's just, it's kind of scary. Let's not focus too long on it. But
Shane's like moving along swiftly, so all my nightmares don't come creeping in.
The gears just going in my head there as we thought of those games. 4-0 win for Vera Pauw's team last night.
Yes.
Good way to finish what was an okay year for.
It was all right. I mean, it was what it was.
Yeah.
Not historical in any sense at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, no, it was a weird game because we were 2-0 up after about 16 minutes and 2 quite good goals. Yeah. And then there was 45-50 minutes where nothing happened. We were really sloppy in our passing. Vera Pauw set up the team. Well, I thought it was weird. And you can listen to Koi Gig for a bit more about why we thought it was weird, which will be out later today. But she just had Amber Barrett as the lone striker up the top, and you're playing a team like Morocco. You know, they're not pushovers by any means because we drew 2-2 with them on Friday when we played them. But you kind of think that's an opportunity to test out, I don't know, McCabe a little bit higher up the pitch or try like 2 at the top and see how it goes. Like she seems focused on this thing that we can't play an attacking style of football, and surely now is our time to start trying it out and like messing around with it a little bit and just seeing if there's a possibility that we can, because I don't think we can go to a World Cup with just Heather Payne or Amber Barrett, whoever it is, playing like solo up the top and absolutely running the legs off themselves.
Yeah.
Wrecked by 60 minutes. No goals, because they've been, every ball, it's just kind of like a hope that one of them gets on the end of it, basically. Yeah. And it's slightly frustrating to see us still play in that negative way. Like, I know it has in some ways got us where we are, but also it's whenever the team starts shifting a little bit that stuff actually happens, and I don't know how she doesn't see that. I mean, she's on the show later on today, so we can ask her all those questions then. But great to see Louise Quinn get a goal on her 100th cap. Yeah.
What an achievement.
Absolute stalwart of the game.
Is this her first goal not with her head? I saw her tweeting something like that last night, that finally I get a goal for Ireland. I think she's got 16 goals or something.
Yeah,
they're all...
it's the first one. I'm not sure if it's the first one she hasn't scored with her head, or the first one that her head hasn't been involved.
Right.
Because sometimes she'll like kind of head it down and it'll end up at her feet and like scooch it in or whatever it is. But yeah, it was such a ridiculous goal to score as well. I mean, she smashed it towards the net and then the defender hit it back at her and it kind of just like bobbled around until it eventually ended in the net. And Kyra Caruso got a goal as well, and it was her birthday. So it was a very nice way to celebrate.
Yeah, nice way to celebrate it. It was a strange one in that lull in between the opening 2 goals and the rest.
Yeah.
It was a bit strange. Like before, even the possession was a bit sloppy, and considering what Morocco were 52 places or something below them in the rankings.
Yeah.
The rankings don't matter much, but
yeah, but see, that's the thing. Like, especially with women's football, I feel like the rankings are always such a poor judge of like how a team actually plays. Because Morocco did come second in AFCON. They beat Nigeria. It was on penalties. They do have some good players. I think sometimes the rankings are very European focused, and they don't do a lot of justice to like the South American teams, the African, the Asian teams, and even just the way the competition structure is set up, and because there is still those massive disparities in women's football, it's like very hard to judge teams off against each other in the traditional sense.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it was, I mean, this camp, it was very low-key. For many reasons. I think that's kind of what the FAI wanted and needed for this. Like, because of everything that happened at the end of the qualification, I don't think the team actually had a time to come together and just kind of soak in everything that happened and be together as a team. And so I think maybe this was almost like a recuperation sort of time for them with some games attached. I don't think we learned anything massive from it at all. Yeah. I think it was more just about getting the team together and
get the last game done.
Yeah, get the last game done, have that sort of mentality, have something nice like Louise Quinn getting 100 caps. I mean, she's so respected in that team. We were talking about it yesterday on the show, like when Katie McCabe was given the armband, Louise Quinn was kind of the person who was in line to get it, and obviously she didn't, and she's talking quite openly about how hard that was for her at the time. But McCabe always talks about how much she helped her during that time, and she was the person she went to with any questions, and it shows an incredible selflessness to be able to set aside your own personal hurt over maybe not getting something like the captain's armband and help the person that comes through. So
it's fair.
Louise Quinn is very much a woman for the team and a 100%. Woman for Ireland.
Proper leader in the team. You mentioned Vera Pauw. I should give everyone a heads up on what's coming up across the rest of the show between now and 9:30 this morning. So we've got loads. So Vera Pauw, we mentioned at 9 o'clock or so, Vera's going to be on with us, the Republic of Ireland women's manager. She will reflect on that Morocco game and talk it through in detail with her. And of course, like I said, it was the last game. It's actually the first game, I guess, of the World Cup preparations. You can look at it 2 ways. It's a long way until the World Cup, but still, it's the start of it. I mean,
you look at the autumn nations at the moment, like we're talking about it as prep for the World Cup.
Well, it's true.
And the World Cup is like a year away. So I think we do this anytime when there's like a year run into a World Cup.
Start of the process.
We just get excited as a nation.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have Chris Medland very shortly with us on OTB AM talking Formula 1. Lots of juicy stuff coming out of the Grand Prix in Brazil at the weekend, including Max Verstappen not letting his good teammate Sergio Perez by. We've got Gerry Thornley from 8:10 or so talking rugby. We'll of course discuss Andy Friend, the announcement that he's to leave Connacht, And of course, take a look ahead to the Australia game this weekend as well and reflect on Fiji for one last time. The sports pages as well from about 8:30. We've got my Carlson then around 8:50 or so. Loads of interesting talking points from the NFL, including the Buffalo Bills versus the Minnesota Vikings at the weekend. What a cracking game that was. The Vikings, They're sneaking up on everyone. No one had fancied them at the start of the year, but here they come. And then, as I said, Vera Pauw from around 9:05. So we'll talk with the Republic of Ireland women's team manager. But now at 7:55 AM on OTB AM this morning, it is time to say a very good morning to the Formula 1 broadcaster and journalist Chris Medland. Morning, Chris.
Guys, how you doing?
We're keeping well. We were talking about the Cristiano Ronaldo controversy for most of this morning so far, but there is a little bit of controversy as well in Formula 1 out of the Grand Prix in Brazil at the weekend. Max Verstappen. I mean, Jesus Christ, what's going on here? For people who maybe aren't aware of what did happen, because essentially Sergio Perez has been the stalwart for Max Verstappen, helping him out left, right and centre, dragging him to a world championship last year. Not really dragging him, but really giving him a helping hand by blocking off Lewis Hamilton at different points. And Max didn't return the favour at the weekend.
Yeah, pretty much in a nutshell. I think the first thing to say is that Max has been the dominant driver at the two for the last 2 seasons, and in some ways you could say he hasn't always needed help, but whenever he has needed it or the team have felt it was the right thing to do, Perez has abided whatever the kind of ruling is that's come down from the team orders. Then we're now in a position where Perez is fighting Charles Leclerc for second in the Drivers' Championship, which is, it's not the greatest accolade that any driver wants, but it's better than nothing. And Red Bull have never had both drivers finish first and second in the season. So that's what they want to try and achieve. And Perez was running pretty strongly in Brazil and then was having a tough time towards the end of the race. And he was down in 6th place. Verstappen was recovering from incidents earlier on, was 7th with just about 5 laps to go, catching Perez. No threat from behind. So Red Bull said, okay, Max can go ahead and try and chase the cars in front. And if he can make further positions, great. But if he can't, then he'll give the place back to Sergio. And on the final lap, he was reminded that if you can't overtake, it was Fernando Alonso who's trying to pass, then you're going to have to give the place back to Sergio. And he didn't do it. As soon as the race was over, the team asked him on team radio what had happened. And he said, I've given you my reasons already. I've told you before I wouldn't do that. And I stand by them. And he was very angry that the team had put him in that position. So it seems to have been an underlying issue where Max had long since informed Red Bull that he wasn't going to obey any team order that he was going to get, and he wasn't going to give up a position to Sergio. One thing that was quite interesting was the way Max overtook Sergio during that race was a pretty robust and solid move. It didn't look like Sergio just moved over for him at that time. So I'm not sure how clear the message had been to Sergio, whether he'd been told Max won't overtake you or whether he'd been told, yeah, he will. But Sergio had been expecting that place back and didn't get it.
It was a bit like the wording, even when you're listening to the team radio, Chris, on that last lap. So Verstappen asked again on the last lap to let Perez through, and the reply, so he replied that he told the team he wouldn't previously. Are we clear about that? I gave my reasons and I stuck by it. He wouldn't really elaborate in the post-race interviews as to what he meant by that, but that phraseology, Chris, are we clear about that? Like, who's in charge here, the driver or the team?
Well, that's a big part of this, is that there's a bit of a power struggle going on there at Red Bull anyway. It's always been a bit of an interesting setup because you have Helmut Marko, who calls a lot of the shots around the drivers, but then you have Christian Horner as the team principal. So Horner kind of controls other aspects of the teams, and those two almost have a bit of a power struggle between the two of them. But now Verstappen knows he's the top dog there in terms of the driver. He's the star man that they've got under contract for a long, long time, and he wants the team to kind of work the way he wants it to work. And it seemed to stem from something that happened earlier in the year. Now, there's a lot of talk about an incident where Sergio Perez crashed in Monaco during qualifying, and to me, it seems quite actually far-fetched that it would be legitimately because he did that on purpose. But if it was something to do with that, there's been a trigger point that's upset Verstappen that means he feels like Perez doesn't always help him, and he wanted to make a point. And up to now, he hasn't actually had to. They haven't had a situation where he's been asked to move over for Sergio. So what was strange for me is that Max was so firm about it, as you say, with that wording, with that approach. For 6th place, it was over 6th and 7th. Red Bull weren't the quickest team in Interlagos. Max had a tough race. You know, the win wasn't on, the podium wasn't on. It was genuinely over 2 points, and the championship's already wrapped up. So it felt like the wrong time to make such a firm stance and to really ram it home, because not only that, the team and Max came out afterwards, as you said, said, Max has given his reasons, but they're going to stay behind closed doors. But Max made it very public by doing those team radio messages after the race. So, a bit of a bizarre twist that's meant after a season where he's driven brilliantly on the whole, Max is suddenly kind of coming across as the bad guy for not helping his teammate.
Just comes across as remarkably ungracious, like on Max's behalf. I don't know, like how the divide among Formula One fans, how they feel about this generally speaking. But I mean, I'm sure there are still Verstappen fans who are kind of coming in and saying, well, this just shows Max's winning attitude and winning mentality, and you need to have that ego to win world championships. And now he's won 2. So is there an element of that to it, that he's just showing that he's a winner? He doesn't care who he pisses off, essentially, because, as you said, the power struggle there has Max as the leader of this team, and maybe Perez can't say anything about this really because he knows that Max is the main man.
A little. I imagine Perez hasn't always been delighted with the way things have been behind the scenes because he's been kind of playing second fiddle when asked to. But I think it's more the way that Max has gone about it just surprised me, because you can have that kind of single-mindedness and desire to win a championship and win at all costs. Yes, but again, this wasn't for a win. This wasn't the time to really implement that. Sebastian Vettel did it to Mark Webber quite a few years ago, again at Red Bull. And that seemed to stem from a disagreement they'd had only a few months earlier in a championship decider when there was a lot on the line. And he felt that Webber hadn't really helped him out at the start of that race. He kind of cut him off at turn 1. And that rolled over to 2 races into the new season, and he just ignored the team order to stay behind Webber when they were fighting for a win for 1-2 quite early in the race as well. So again, like, the stakes were different. There was a championship still on the line then. For now, I think what most Verstappen fans seem to be saying, and understandably, if the catalyst is a strong one, is he said he had his reasons and he's got his reasons, and you kind of have to respect that. If he said he wasn't going to do it and then the team put him in the position of telling him to do it publicly, then he stood firm. Potentially that's a fair point, but the fact that the team haven't come out and said why, or Max hasn't, this is why it's really hurting him. You can't really have this response and then be like, well, I can't tell you the reasons, but just know I'm right, because how would you judge someone that they're right or not? So I think that's what I found most strange. The majority of fans have said that it's reflected very badly on him and hurt his reputation, but we've also seen from Max in the past, he doesn't care too much about his reputation. So I don't think it will really hurt him personally too much. But it could have been handled, I think, a much better way.
Where does the team go from here now? Because obviously there's still races left. They're going to have to compete together. There might be another situation where Perez does need Verstappen to help him out. Like, do you think that now Verstappen has made his point, he doesn't have to make it again? And especially with all the attention it's got and the way it's kind of unfolded over the last few days?
That's the way that Max sees it. That's the way he said it after the race in Brazil. I mean, for anyone who does get the pain of having to see me on screen, that I'm in Abu Dhabi already for the final race, which is what the backdrop is, and there's one race to go, so everyone's already headed halfway across the world for that. It will be a quick follow-up. There'll be a lot of talk about it this weekend and heading into the weekend, but Max did say that he would help Sergio in any way he needed to here to get the job done in terms of finishing ahead of Leclerc. The equation's simple, though. Perez needs to finish ahead of Leclerc to finish second in the championship. They're level on points now, so it's a bit like Hamilton and Verstappen last year, but just for a much smaller prize. And I think in that sense, there's actually going to be quite little Verstappen can do to help, but he says he will if needed. But then we go into the winter break. We've got an off season that finally is a couple of months with the World Cup. We'll be back in February with testing, and I think that time is probably well timed to kind of diffuse the situation, clear the air behind closed doors properly at Red Bull's factory if needed, but also just for the storyline to die down a little bit, and the pressure will be a lot lower starting next year. So I think for the team, they've got a tough week coming up of questions and hoping they don't get another flashpoint. But after that, they should be okay, that they can kind of breathe out for a while.
It's funny you mentioned this on Twitter, Chris, as well. The fact that Interlagos, that circuit in Brazil, tends to be quite feisty in terms of teammate relationships. It's not the first time, or even it wasn't the first time at the weekend where two teammates kind of clashed in some way. Like some people making the point that I guess it's towards the end of the championship when things are a bit heated and there's a lot of overtaking at the Interlagos circuit as well. But it is a funny one that there seems to be a lot of high points of I guess team stress at the Interlagos circuit.
Yeah, it was. I did find it a little bit strange, but as you say, it tends to be at a point where there's a lot at stake. It's either the final race of the season or one of the last races of the season. And it is a circuit that is conducive to some good racing, but also isn't It's not the widest circuit. It's not a new track. It's quite a tricky layout in terms of undulating and some narrow sections and fairly high speed corners as well, where drivers can go side by side. So the margins are fine that can lead to them. But even over the weekend we just had, on Saturday in the sprint race, Lance Stroll nearly drove Sebastian Vettel into the wall. And got a heavy penalty for it. That was his teammate when they were racing over position. Then we had Charles Leclerc with the same kind of view as Sergio Perez, trying to secure that second place overall, wanted to be allowed to go ahead of his teammate Carlos Sainz late in the race on Sunday. He said afterwards that it was because the team had discussed it and said they'd do that if that situation arose. But then I think the scenario was actually a bit risky. Fernando Alonso was very close behind Leclerc late in the race. So as much as Leclerc thought he was going to get given that position, I can see why Ferrari actually decided maybe not today. But again, that meant you had these kind of discussions going on about team orders. We've had it in the past. Vettel and Leclerc collided, took each other out in 2019. As I mentioned, the Webber and Vettel incident was actually in 2012 and the title decider there. So I think Webber's been involved in other incidents with teammates. There's so many that seem to happen at Interlagos, but it is a great, great circuit. It's a bit of a shame, in my view, that it's not the final race of the season anymore because of the drama it seems to provide, whatever the situation is. And the weather can be mixed in, but it's a bit of an old school track that the drivers seem to really love and makes for good racing. So, yeah, we did have a good one this weekend. It's just sort of overshadowed by the final lap and the Red Bull situation.
Seems to be the general theme of the week, whether it's football or it's F1.
Yeah, overshadowing by controversial.
Great results overshadowed by controversial talking points by people who have big egos. Is that fair enough to say?
Slightly big egos. I think that's fair. And that's the point that Kathleen makes, Chris. Like, we forget nearly that George Russell, at the 81st time of asking, is a race winner, and like that's kind of been hidden, and it's a really emotional moment for him. I know he kind of talked about needing the tissues out after when he crossed the checkered flag. I mean, that was quite a moment for George Russell.
Yeah, it was amazing. I actually felt bad because I do live radio post race for radio station in America, and I was stood outside Red Bull trying to get hold of Red Bull team members. I was watching some arguments unfold inside, and I'm thinking, this is overshadowing. Yeah, Mercedes won two, not to forget as well. It wasn't just Russell's win, and it wasn't luck. It was pace. They were the quickest team all weekend. Russell won the sprint and then won from pole, with Hamilton making it a 1-2, even though he had a clash with Verstappen. So he came back from that. So really impressive from Mercedes. And I was lucky enough to grab a word with George just after the race, where they'd done the team photo, sprayed a load of champagne in the pit lane, and thousands of fans were still on the track, and he stood on the pit wall, and the noise was deafening. It was incredible. Like, that is huge support just for Formula One in Brazil, but they love Lewis Hamilton, and almost by default they love his teammate. And even though George beat him, they were delighted for him. So it was a really, really popular win. And I don't think it really bothers George that there was another talking point, because he was still fully enjoying the moment. But it was a bit of a shame that it wasn't the only focus. But a really, really good job by him. It will be the first of many, and I think it's a sign that Mercedes will get a few more wins next season than just the one they have so far this year.
It's mad when I was looking back this morning just trying to find when Hamilton had last won. So the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix last year, the madness of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix last year, that was Hamilton's 8th win of the season, 3rd in a row. Like, if you had said that Mercedes wouldn't win again for 343 days, I mean, people would have told you were mad. And even the 2020 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, that was the last time, like, over 2 years before they'd have a 1-2 finish again. So, I mean, remarkable that it's taken Mercedes so long to get to the top of the pile here again.
Yeah, I mean, there's another stat that really sums it up that I think is incredible, is that Kevin Magnussen has more pole positions than Lewis Hamilton this year, because Magnussen qualified on pole on Friday, because it was a sprint weekend. Pole was decided in qualifying on Friday in Interlagos, and it was sort of damp conditions, and Haas did a brilliant job, and Magnussen put it on pole. So even though Russell then won that race and started first in the Grand Prix, technically the stats say that Magnussen has a pole this year and Hamilton doesn't, which is, just incredible. But it also shows how far back Mercedes have had to come from through this year. It's easy to look at them kind of making solid progress in recent weeks and months, but if we go back, you mentioned Emilia-Romagna in 2020, but even this year that was a sprint race and they were nowhere. Neither driver made it into the top 10 in qualifying. Russell had a great drive but in a bit of chaos to get into the top 4, but Hamilton really struggled to even get through the field, and the car just wasn't competitive. They were really a midfield team at that point. So the strides have been massive, and that's what's impressive. That's the kind of Mercedes we know. They can make that sort of progress and recover from this sort of issue. But they've needed to do it, and they've kept developing this year because they've needed to find solutions to the problems they had earlier in the year. Red Bull and Ferrari have maybe focused a bit more on next year already. And it will mean that I wouldn't expect to see Mercedes winning first race of next year, but I think they'll be a lot closer starting next season and really in the mix with the top two, to the extent that I think they'll be title contenders again. So an impressive turnaround. But yeah, it's incredible that it took them so long with these new rules to get to that level.
It's funny that we're talking about Verstappen not letting Perez pass. There was a similar issue with Ferrari where Leclerc wanted the Ferrari team to order Carlos Sainz to let him pass, but I guess it's totally different in that Sainz got his podium, and he's not really going to give up a podium finish to help Leclerc finish second in the Drivers' Championship, is he?
I don't think so, but to be honest, he wasn't even asked in the end. That's the kind of biggest difference. Was Red Bull had told Verstappen that he needed to get out the way for Perez, and Verstappen declined. With Ferrari, they'd apparently discussed pre-race that they would swap their drivers if it helped Leclerc, and they were running in order like that late in the race. But because Leclerc asked the question, Ferrari looked at the race situation. Fernando Alonso was very quick and was within a second or just over a second behind Leclerc. So once Sainz slowed down and let Leclerc through, he'd be very vulnerable and could lose another place. So they thought that it's not worth the risk. So they just replied to Leclerc and said, no, we're not going to do it. It's too risky, which Charles didn't quite appreciate or wasn't too happy with at the time. But he said, I'll talk to the team and find out why they decided differently to what we said pre-race. But for Sainz, then he was asked in the press conference afterwards when he finished third about that message. And he was like, it's the first, I've just been told about it before coming in here. I wasn't told anything by my engineer. They didn't ask me to do anything, so I can't really comment at the moment. It wasn't that he was giving them the order and said, no, I'm staying here for third. But it would have been an interesting response, because you're right, he would be giving up a trophy and a podium, which is a lot more than just 2 points for sixth and seventh, which again brings me back to why I thought it was so unnecessary for Verstappen to make that point with those positions. But Sainz, I would have maybe thought would have been more justified if he'd said no. And at the end of the day, I think Ferrari maybe avoided too much stress because of what happened with Red Bull too. Neither team actually pulled off what they were intending to or thinking about doing, so they kind of leveled each other out a little bit.
It was funny, like a lot of people, I suppose George Russell was the driver of the day, but Fernando Alonso's performance, Chris, at the weekend, I mean, he just keeps doing this. 18th on the grid he starts, and he ends up finishing 5th, 3 places clear of Verstappen on his Alpine teammate. Of course, you mentioned they had their issues, but clashing in the sprint race. He must infuriate the Alpine team, because on the one hand he's talking openly about how much he can't wait to get to Aston Martin for next season, but then also he's just racking up points for Alpine and keeps putting in these performances that just show us why he's a 2-time world champion. Yeah,
it's one of those things where we all spoke about it kind of in the paddock on Sunday, and it's that, could you even remember a time when Alonso left a Formula One team on good terms? He tended to set it on fire before walking out the door, sort of thing. But he could do that because he's so good. He was always pushing hard. It was very demanding, and that worked to an extent. But then when the relationship broke down, it was quite volatile. So then he'd move on. And that's kind of happened with Alpine. They've given him the chance to come back. He was very positive about the team last year when he returned to F1. Did a good job last year, had some real standout performances. But this year, I'd say, has gone up a level again and is very much as good as he's ever been. But because he's making the move to Aston Martin, because he felt Alpine were never going to get to the level needed to fight for wins, and that Aston Martin had the ability to do so, you could just see his mindset change. And it didn't take much. He got penalised for one of the incidents with Ocon on Saturday, where he hit the back of his teammate on the pit straight, and the stewards deemed it was dangerous because of the speed they're doing. They couldn't really make an error like that. It was a misjudgment. It was a mistake rather than anything malicious, but at those speeds, you can't really afford those mistakes. So he got a penalty and he wasn't happy about it. But because he'd been involved in contact with Ocon earlier that he felt was Ocon's fault, he was kind of lashing out. And he kind of did say that he was looking forward just to getting to the final race and getting in the green car, as he put it. But then that was because Saturday had been so bad for the team. And I think there was an element of guilt there. So he's kind of deflecting at that stage. Come Sunday, brilliant performance, as you say, up to 5th, nearly got to 4th. He had a good chance of getting at the Ferraris as well on fresh tyres at the end. Really, really impressive drive. And then he comes out saying, well, it's the only time we've ever collided in 2 years. We've always been great. We've always kept it clean. People make a big deal out of nothing. And suddenly the narrative changes from Alonso. He likes to kind of play in the media a little bit. So he was much more positive. Didn't mention Aston Martin at all on Sunday night. Talked about what a great job for the team they'd done and how great this weekend should be, because Alpine should be able to wrap up fourth in the Constructors' Championship ahead of McLaren, which is their big goal. So, his tone changed very quickly with that. But it is, as you say, one of the infuriating things about him, but it's the sort of thing you put up with because his talent's so good.
Absolutely. Chris, you've been great with your time. You must be absolutely wrecked. It strikes me that it's a long flight from Sao Paulo to Abu Dhabi, and it's only Tuesday morning and the race was on Sunday.
Yeah, we got to the hotel here in Abu Dhabi at about 3 a.m. local time yesterday, and it's now midday. So in my head, it's about 5 a.m. still on Brazil time. But nothing some coffees won't fix, and chatting to you guys really helps to get the morning started. So
absolutely.
Not too bad.
We'll get the afternoon nap in if you can, Chris. Listen,
I might, yeah.
Absolutely. Great stuff as always, Chris. Thanks a million.
Thank you very much. Cheers for having me.
Chris Medland there, the Formula 1 broadcaster and journalist. Like, that must be a mad life, following Formula 1 races around the world.
Oh, it's absolutely mental. Like, one of my very, very good friends, Nate Saunders, he's F1 editor with ESPN, and his life is just mad. Like, every week you text him and be like, Nate, do you want to go for a pint? And he's like, nah, sorry, I'm in Brazil or I'm in Abu Dhabi or somewhere absolutely incredible. He's like, I should be back in about 6 months when the championship finishes.
Yeah. Mad stuff. Fair play to him though. Chris Medland joining us as per usual. Reminder as well on OTB AM this morning that Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Each week we're giving one lucky viewer a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn Coffee goodness at an Apple Green store near you. To enter, check out @OffTheBall on Twitter. Just like and retweet our Braeburn competition post and you are in the draw. Braeburn Coffee never compromises on quality or taste to give you the best on-the-go coffee experience on the road. Available at Apple Green today. Now back after the break with Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times. This follows news, of course, that the Connacht head coach Andy Friend will leave the province at the end of the season. First, though, here's Gordon Darcy and Rory O'Connor on Andy Farrell's incredibly high standards. Back in a moment.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Koigig Pod on OTB Sports.
Production of a Women's Nations League. We have followed the path of the man card. I can see your face already.
I think all the concerns that we have, obviously being that middle tier, are very valid, considering just how much we benefited from playing teams of a higher calibre going into our qualifiers.
Keep up to date with all the WSL action every Tuesday and subscribe to the feed in the OTB Sports app now.
OTB Sports Rugby.
Do you know when you dream as a young fella, you want to play for Ireland, you want to play for Leinster, you want to play for the Lions? I never even dreamed of Captain Ireland.
What did you dream?
Spuds, gravy, mother's Sunday roast. Just playing for Ireland, you know what I mean? It was never...
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo.
Yep, 17 minutes past 8 on this Tuesday morning on OTB AM with myself and Kathleen. OTB AM brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. There's plenty of comments coming in on the YouTube this morning. Someone Verstappen, like it just feels like we're talking about
the same thing.
Issue. It's the same thing. There's just controversy in different sports at the minute, but Verstappen backstabbing his own team, Ronaldo backstabbing his own team. It just seems to be a theme. Someone on YouTube says Ronaldo will move to his hometown club and you'll be gushing over the romantic ending to his career. I just don't know.
I don't think so. Well, you might be. I definitely won't be.
No, I won't be. I don't look. I have to say, when Ronaldo had that first stint at United, 03 to 09, you kind of appreciated what he was doing. You know, the 42 goals in one season in 08 when they won the Champions League and the Premier League. Fans of Real Madrid and Juventus will look at him quite fondly from a footballing perspective.
The thing is, as well, I don't think Ronaldo wants like a romantic homecoming. He doesn't seem interested in it at all.
He wants records and individual honours.
Because he could have gone home at this stage and even just played for a season if he wanted, and then maybe built up his reputation a bit and went somewhere else. But he was very firm that he didn't want to do that. I
just don't know. I don't know how this goes. But then, having said that, with the whole Tottenham stuff when he refused to come off the bench, I thought this could be the death knell. But then it was all handled really well by Erik ten Hag, and even Ronaldo went off to the reserves, came back, was given the captaincy even, wasn't he, for the Aston Villa game at one point. Like,
it's just a bizarre chain of events.
It just doesn't make... This one feels more serious in that he's completely gone behind it. Like, he didn't ask the club's permission to do this interview, obviously. I was listening to Piers Morgan chatting yesterday on a couple of shows, and He wouldn't reveal when the interview was recorded.
That's the other thing I'd love to know.
Yeah, because what was the timing of this? What was the catalyst for Ronaldo to go, okay, now is the time? Because it has emerged that he is the one who approached Piers Morgan. Like, Morgan did not go looking for this interview. This was one that Cristiano Ronaldo got him on the phone and said, I want to speak and get my job. Like, even the fact that he's gone to Piers Morgan.
That as well, like, it just doesn't give the interview any credibility, I think, in a lot of people's
fanboys.
eyes.
There's a fanboy. He's a Ronaldo fanboy.
I'm sure he was tweeting, was it yesterday or the day before, being like, oh, Ronaldo should sign for Arsenal now. Him and Jesus would win Arsenal the league. And I was like, could you imagine Arteta in a million years wanting a Ronaldo in his team? Like, Arteta has just managed to wean out all the big personalities in Arsenal, and has even turned around Granit Xhaka in everyone's eyes as being like one of the best players Arsenal have ever had. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but considering where he came from, like, it's been that big a transformation. Of course he doesn't want Ronaldo.
I think Arsenal will have learned from the whole Aubameyang situation. You don't need people in the dressing room who are causing issues, and Ten Hag will realise that now. Like, there's no need for Ronaldo to be in the team because this season he's not adding to United whatsoever. Last season he did score a number of fairly important goals. We don't know what impact he has behind the scenes in terms of chatting to younger players, but his professionalism has been called into question now.
Like, I've no doubt if you're a younger player and you see Ronaldo in training and the tricks he can pull off, and even if he is willing to talk to the younger players, which he seems to have been in the past, then definitely there's something to learn from him. But I also don't think you want your younger players looking at someone like him and getting to a stage where they're scoring lots of goals and thinking they're great and being like, oh, well, I can act whatever way I want. I mean, you don't want anyone thinking that in your team, never mind like someone that's younger. Even
when Ronaldo came out, one of the clips in the Piers Morgan interview, he said, like, United can't really challenge, like Liverpool and Man City and even Arsenal at the minute. They can't challenge for a title within the next 2 or 3 years. For a player to be coming out saying that, like, United fans will have been hoping that maybe they could challenge in 2 or 3 seasons for the title. Sign some new good players, keep the young players like Garnacho coming through, Ten Hag.
And like, even if he did feel like that, he should have better reasoning for it.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, I can understand a player coming out and saying that and maybe doing it in a bit of a, I'm trying to give my team a kick, in the same way when a team doesn't play well and a captain comes out and they're like, look, we weren't good enough, whatever it was, we need to change something. But he just didn't really give any good reasons, and he wasn't like even saying, I'm going to try and help change this. Like, I have this legacy with Man United, and the reason I came back here is because they're so close to my heart. And I mean, admittedly, the full interview still has to come out, so maybe he did say all that, but Doubtful. Yeah.
That's
the thing as well. We still don't know what the rest of the interview.
We're just getting, and that's a fair point. We're only getting snippets and probably the most juicy stuff.
Yeah.
In some ways, but of course they want to leave some stuff for the interview itself. But I mean, like Bob Dwyer on YouTube, if I was a United fan, I'd want Ronaldo to be thrown in with the under-23s to rot. I wouldn't let him go or sack him because that's what he wants. Like, and that's another thing that people have been talking about, the fact that,
I think that's like kind of the taking your nose off to spite your face.
That's it too.
Letting him stay.
Yeah, that's true. And like, if they let him out on loan or something, they have to maybe subsidise his wages, and I don't think they want to do that because that's just rewarding disloyalty. Like, they have to either just let him go. They can't let him sit in the 23s. I think he needs to just get out of the club.
Yeah.
Now, I said he'll come back to Old Trafford, I think, after the World Cup. That might just be to clear out his locker, essentially. Like, there's, if he does go on a pitch for United again, I'd be relatively surprised.
Yeah, like, definitely.
It's hard to see it happening. Like, Ten Hag, a manager he says he has no respect for. You can't pick him in a team after that.
Yeah. Well, it's like, what can Ten Hag, like, obviously the two of them are going to have to sit down at some stage if he does come back to United for training or whatever. Because, like, what are you supposed to, or does Ten Hag just send him off and be like, no, you can't?
Yeah.
See, I don't know as well, but like contracts and stuff, maybe there's stuff there that we just don't know about where, like, do you have to, is that this a frustrated contract now? So, like, he can't actually turn up at the club and perform and different things. Like, I don't know. I'm so tired. It's so early in the morning and I've talked so much about Ronaldo. I'm like, this is unfair. I hate him for this alone.
Look, it's keeping the kind of the news off the World Cup still.
Sorry, speaking of the World Cup, this is one thing that you pointed out to me earlier that we have to talk about. The fact that the English plane to the World Cup is called Rainbow.
Rainbow. Two separate words.
Separate words. And
so they've done their bit. They've done their bit for the LGBT community.
This is supposed to be in support of the LGBT community. 'Cause obviously, there's been a lot of talk about what teams would do or might do whenever they get over to Qatar. You had the Australian team release that really good video. You had Denmark apply to wear the jerseys that say human rights for all. England are part of the group that said they'll wear the One Love armbands. But naming your plane Rainbow.
Rainbow.
2 words.
Virgin Atlantic plane named a Rainbow in support for the LGBT plus community. You probably won't be able to see this photograph too well, but you can see the England squad who are all suited and booted. They got their team photograph and they're all wearing their white shirts and black trousers and black suit jacket as well. And I don't know. They've met up and they're doing their little bit. I think that's what that's their claim.
It just like I can't actually process it in my head. I just think it makes such a mockery of everything that everyone has talked about in the lead up to this World Cup, that the request from so many groups, whether it's human rights groups, LGBT groups, for support and like proper support. And I know like the English team have come out and said that they do support the LGBT community. Harry Kane's talked about it, Southgate's talked about it. Southgate did get a little bit tetchy about it towards the end. He was like, I just want to talk about the football now. I don't really want to talk about these things. But do you not see how... It's like, you know, like people talk about, say, the commercialisation of something like Pride.
Yeah.
This is another prime example of it. And that no one turned around and thought that this is just the worst idea in the world.
I mean, it's only little tidbits of little things they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And if you thought if you're coming around to the idea of maybe supporting England during the World Cup, I'll just post this photograph without comment. We have James Maddison and Declan Rice. Declan doing the peace sign and the English bucket hats, which became a festival fashion thing of the last year or two, it feels.
Yeah, they're big at football matches, especially English football matches. Although Shells were wearing them, weren't they? After the women, after they won the league and the cup, they had bucket hats. So maybe it's just a football thing now.
Yeah, I was at Kendrick Lamar on Sunday night, didn't see any bucket hats. I was surprised.
Yeah.
Because usually at all these gigs now you see plenty of bucket hats, but yep, they weren't around that day. Sorry, the Qatar stuff as well.
That's the thing as well, because that story about the rainbow plane is just inside that page that you're holding up there.
Stadiums of shame. Like some of the numbers there, so you've got numbers down the right hand side of the back page of The Guardian here. $200 billion Qatar's reported spend on getting the World Cup ready. 18 hours worked a day by some migrant workers. £1 is the hourly legal minimum wage in the country, and then 11 cases of ill treatment in detention for LGBTQ plus people between 2019 and this year, which is just...
But don't worry, guys, England are coming on their rainbow plane.
Yeah, that's all that matters. That is all that matters. 8:27 a.m. on this Tuesday morning's OTB. I'm delighted to say a very good morning to the Irish Times' Gerry Thornley. Morning, Gerry. How are things?
Good morning, Shane. How are you?
Keeping well. We decided to get you on this morning, Gerry. I suppose the news that Andy Friend has announced he's leaving Connacht at the end of the season. It's got us all thinking about his legacy at the province. And look, he's done some great things. It's not really a surprise. I suppose the end was always going to come at some point, but he's left a serious legacy at Connacht, Gerry.
Yeah, I tend to agree. When the news first broke yesterday, I mean, it's a Monday, it's a busy Monday, lots of things going on in November, you know, and Ireland playing Australia next Saturday and so forth. And you go, oh, Andy Friend's leaving. And you're initially surprised. Then you think about it, it quickly makes all your sense. It's actually been his longest stint in his coaching career at one place. It's his 5th season with Connacht. He's never stayed more than 3 seasons anywhere else because that's often the life of a career coach. You know what I mean? They're nomadic in their existence and they move around a fair bit. And I just think he needs to get home. You know, COVID was very tough on an awful lot of people, but particularly those, say, just talking about rugby, just talking about those who are from abroad. You know, I think Andy didn't see his family for about 3 years. And so they've been home this summer, and I think I might be right in saying next year will be himself and Kerry will be their first family Christmas in about 10 years. You know, you forget about the human stuff away from all of this at times as well.
Yeah, you really actually don't think about it. You know, you always think of the sporting perspective, but then when you put it like that, you know, you need time to your family, you need to get home and do these things as well. Like when you think about it, I'm just looking at some of his stats. He's won 51 of his 105 games in charge. Of course, took them to the knockout stages of the Heineken Champions Cup last season for the first time. Like when you consider as well, Gerry, I guess the state Connacht were in 2018 when he took over. you had the underwhelming tenure of Kieran Keane, maybe that came beforehand, so he wasn't taking over at a high point, so that kind of highlights his legacy all the more.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that as well, Shane, that they were at a little bit of a low ebb in 2018. The post-Pat Lam era hasn't worked out very well for them with Kieran Keane. They moved Kieran Keane on. They'd had a couple of derby wins, rising one-off occasions, but there've been no real clear pattern of play as such. And he came in and they redeveloped their identity, as it were, under Andy Friend, and the results have been pretty good. Some of the rugby has been absolutely spectacular. The development of players through the academy, there's been an awful lot of players come through the academy. They've made some good signings, most obviously Mac Hansen. I mean, they had Bundy Aki, Mac Hansen and Finlay Bealham all involved in the series win over New Zealand during the summer for Ireland. And we must also remember that the reconfiguration of the United Rugby Championship probably disadvantaged Connacht more than any other team in the entire competition. I mean, they had to play, the only team that had to play Leinster, Munster and Ulster twice, home and away. Nobody else had to do that. The Italians and the Scots, by comparison, were thrown into a group amongst themselves, and they played each other's home and away. So it really couldn't have been more designed and more unfavourably for Connacht if you tried. And that's going to be in place last season and this season. And then, ironically, it'll be, instead of having ring fencing a team from each country into the following season's Heineken Champions Cup, most likely when he's gone and the RFU will have their say in the matter, they will go to a purely merit-based competition from next season onwards. And I think also as well, we've got to give them credit for giving them abundant notice. I think Willie ran clear from the statement yesterday. They knew this was coming as well. So Connacht got plenty of time to organise a succession plan.
You mentioned it there, Gerry, like you touched on the number of pathway players he's given an opportunity to. So, like, he's handed debuts, I see here, to 51 players during his time in charge, like 21 of those having come through that Connacht pathway system. Like, you talk about legacy, but to bring in players like that and give them experience, some managers just wouldn't do that. They want results immediately and they won't bring through the young players, but there's so many young players in that province now that have got experience because of Andy Friend. Yeah, that's really true. And, you know, that was something that Pat Lam brought in, and he's reinvigorated even more to a greater degree by having all the academy players trained together with the senior squad. So there's one, it's a very kind of holistic approach. The other thing as well is, like, he really believes in Connacht. He bought into Connacht in a huge way. I don't think it was ever his intention to stay 5 seasons. And something about Connacht can do that to people. And I mean, he's got his camper van. Himself and Kerry have travelled all over the 5 counties of Connacht and much further afield too. And you probably see more of Connacht than most Connacht people. And he's bought into what the Connacht means. You know, his policy is to, you know, polish rough diamonds and make them better players. And he really believes in the pathway system. And I think that will be his biggest legacy, as you say, perhaps, that he had so much faith in the system, stayed so long and helped develop so many players playing a brilliant brand of rugby. And the other thing as well, Shane, is he's a very popular figure within Connacht, within the squad, within the organisation. Because in your dealings with him, you just find him very straight and honest, good bloke. He's a very kind of calm, easygoing Aussie. He's sometimes too honest in the wake of his defeat. He'll call it exactly as he sees it. But I think anybody who comes across him would genuinely like the bloke. He's a good bloke, good Aussie.
Gerry, where does Connacht go now when he does leave? Because obviously he has set up the systems, he's set up that legacy, he's continued on from Pat Lam, but whenever someone like that leaves a club, it generally does leave a bit of a hole unless you're very quick to get someone in who's capable of picking up that baton straight away. And as we've seen with Connacht, like there is still a lot of room for growth there, and there is still a lot of room to proceed with how they want to play. Well,
the thing about Connacht is that, like, as I said earlier, they've got plenty of time now to plan this. They probably already have plans in place. Any plans staying until the end of the season. There's a World Cup, so at the end of every World Cup cycle, lots of coaches come on board as well. It might be that they just promote Pete Wilkins from within and add their coaching ticket by bringing in somebody else. They're very well connected in New Zealand. You know, Tim Haaland, the manager, has been there for, I think, well over 20 years now. They've always had good connections in New Zealand. They've had a strong Kiwi bond, if you like, and now they've got a great list of connections in Australia through friends and others as well. So I don't think they'll have any problem identifying someone to come in, and they've got plenty of time to do so. They're a well-known brand themselves now, Connacht. So I think they're in a pretty good position. I mean, Andy Friend's been there for 5 years. It's not like there's a huge upheaval here, whatever they do next.
It was interesting that you touched on that, Gerry, as well. The fact that you know, he's really endeared himself to the people of Connacht, and a lot of that I guess is, and it's probably similar to Stuart Lancaster at the Leinster. He embraced life in the west of Ireland, and Andy Friend, and people probably really latched on to that, the fact that here's a man who's not just coming in to you know, take over a team, but he's coming in to become a part of the club and really, I guess, make Connacht part of the community, because a lot of people who maybe weren't even Connacht fans when he took over now probably go down to the sports ground on a Friday night or whatever to watch them play.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I was there twice this season, and there were both near 8,000 sellouts, and that was an expanded terrace scene at both ends of the ground. This is for a team that, you know, hasn't had a huge amount of success recently since that 2015-16 triumph, and is always, if you like, the underdog, always battling against the odds. They don't have anything like the budget of pretty much any other team in the United Rugby Championship. And when they step into the Champions Cup, or even the Challenge Cup, but certainly the Champions Cup, they really are punching above their weight. And I guess, if you like, he appreciated that, understood that, and encapsulated that. And fans really liked him, I think, and the brand of rugby helped as well. So that not all success is purely based in trophies, although the winning record you mentioned that 51 wins is a pretty serious achievement. And of course, the other thing as well, we must remember all this, he ain't finished yet. He'll want to sign off now in style this season and do something spectacular. They had a rough opening fixture list, but they recovered with a few wins, got 2 vital wins just before the break. And you know, his time isn't done yet.
And even some players who maybe would have really blossomed under Andy Friend, Jack Carty potentially being one of those, like, handed the captaincy as well for this year. Some of these players will be really sad to see him go. Yeah, I think so.
Jack Carty's definitely developed his game under Andy Friend. He's become a captain, a leader. I think I've spoken to Jack about Andy Friend, and he loves his communication skills. He loves the clarity of what he's trying to do, but he's also kind of empowered on the pitch as well. Caelan Blade, others, they've recruited very well, developed players very well. I think that, but like all things in life, Shane, you know, a change is as good as a rest, and 5 years is a pretty decent stint. We've seen Stuart Lancaster go on after 7 seasons with Leinster. You know, these things happen. That's the nature of sport, and you know, time has to move on, and they'll bring in somebody else, and that's the way it is. I mean, like, it's hard to think that Andy Friend actually has been 5 years in Connacht. Where did that go? And similarly, Lancaster 7 years at Leinster, but that's always a good sign.
Before we let you go, Jerry, we should touch on the Australia game this weekend, and you're writing about it in the Irish Times today as well. Wounded Australia, wildly inconsistent, but have capacity to beat the odds. And when you talk about the odds, I think Ireland made 14-point favourites for this game, which, as you say, is unprecedented. And I guess it's off the back of the Italy game at the weekend.
Yeah, and we could basically ignore the Italy game because Australia made 11 changes. They changed their entire pack that really fronted up against France the week before. And they weren't lucky enough to win that game. I mean, their maul defence was excellent. The scrum was good. They scored the best 2 tries in the game. France really won it through the brilliance of their defence, and one moment of magic from Damien Penaud very near the end, 76 minutes, after Mathieu Jalabert came on as a replacement and changed the game a bit. I think that this is a tougher game than it looks. I think Australia were very unlucky not to beat the All Blacks this season as well in Melbourne. Like, very contentious refereeing decision near the end when he penalised their out half Bernard Foley for time wasting, Matthew Ronaldo, and awarded the All Blacks a scrum under the post for the last play of the game. So they could be coming here with the scalps of France, the All Blacks, which shows you that they are a dangerous team, and they're maddeningly inconsistent. They haven't won 2 games in a row all season. They've lost 8 of 12, but then they've had a very tough fixture list, and they'll be wounded. I think they could be more dangerous than the bookies think. But I still expect Ireland to win, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully so, and finish off the November internationals on a high. When you even look at Andy Farrell confirming Ian Henderson and Bundy Aki will be available for this game. Aki, of course, returning from that 7-week suspension following the red card in September in the URC, and talks of potential first start for Jack Crowley as well. Jerry,
I don't think he'll start. I'm pretty sure Johnny Sexton will be fit. It's interesting that they're the only 2 specialists out had in the squad. So they didn't, even though Joey Carby had to go back to Munster, they haven't supplemented the squad by calling in one of the internationally capped out halves that are out there, Ross Byrne, Jack Carty, whom we mentioned, Billy Burns. None of them have been called in, which would tend me to believe that they're not that worried about Johnny Sexton. They'd expect him to lead the side this week and start. But that would suggest also that Jack Crowley is, you know, the misfortune of Kieran Frawley and Joey Carby has opened the door for Jack Crowley. and he probably, having made his debut against Fiji last Saturday, will be on the bench this Saturday against the Wallabies for the last test of the year. So it's been a good window for him. He's a very talented, gifted player. I think Bundy Aki, they've got a straight choice there at inside centre with himself and Stuart McCloskey, particularly with Robbie Henshaw out of the game as well. I think that means Gary Ringrose will certainly start at 13 with the choice between McCloskey and Bundy. Aki's he's just completed suspension 7 weeks and he's been training with the squad throughout the month, so I wouldn't be surprised if he is recalled. And the expectation must be that the other heavy hitters were missing last week, Andrew Porter, Peter O'Mahony, James Ryan, all of those will come back into the team as well and will be a strong Irish selection, and it should be a very interesting atmosphere. 8 p.m. on Saturday night, I don't remember if this happening before, and a chance to close out a real stellar year when you think of the series win in New Zealand this summer and being number one in the world. It's a great chance to close out a great year in fitting fashion.
Absolutely. As you say, 8 p.m. Saturday should add to the atmosphere as well. Gerry, great stuff as always. Thanks a million.
No worries, Shane. Cheers. Take care. Have a good day.
Perfect. Gerry Thornley there, of course, of the Irish Times. Another good piece from Gerry in the Irish Times today as well. Australian forwards coach admitting Hansen is one who got away. So this is Dan McKellar, the Wallabies forwards coach, who was completing his 3rd year as the Brumbies head coach when he was about to offer Mac Hansen a new deal. So he knows Mac Hansen very, very well indeed. I forgot about that as well, Kathleen. The 8 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday at the Aviva, which, as Gerry says, you don't get to
the
often.
times for these games have just been strange in general.
Back and forth,
yeah,
haven't they?
because even the Fiji game at the weekend was at the awards ceremony for Koi Gig on Friday, and I had just kind of forgotten that it was a 1 o'clock kickoff.
So early,
and I was getting a bus somewhere at that time, and I got a push notification on my phone for the Irish Times live blog being like, match is starting, and I was like, what? It's so early.
Yeah. It's because the South Africa game was 5 or half 5? Half 5, wasn't it? And then 1 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock for Australia. There's no continuity to it.
Yeah.
But I guess that does add to the, fans have a lot of, and it doesn't all revolve around alcohol or have to revolve around alcohol, but that will improve the atmosphere. The fans have been in the pub for probably quite a significant portion of Saturday afternoon, some of them.
I feel like early evening is always the perfect time for a match. So say 4 to 6 is kind of like your prime time, because you've enough time in the day to say get up in the morning, get a good feed into you. You can go for your couple of pints. You're not drinking all day and absolutely steamed by the time you get to the match. Or everyone around you even isn't absolutely steamed.
Yeah, it's true.
It's sometimes when you get those later kickoffs that people get a bit overexcited and spend the day in the pub, and then you're like, well, this is a bit of a weird atmosphere to be around.
And there has been a bit said about that at the rugby games as well. People getting up out of their seats and kind of going off to get drinks and walking past other people, and everyone in the row has to stand up. So there'll be a little bit of that possibly on Saturday evening. But yeah, I think it does. It certainly adds to it. The only thing you'd worry with an 8 o'clock kickoff as well is the fans coming in from down the country, from Munster or from Connacht or from Belfast.
It makes it a lot more difficult.
I mean, you get no one can get accommodation in Dublin at the minute in hotels. Shane,
I'm going to start crying if you mention this.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject for you.
Poor Kathleen has been looking for a flat to rent for about 2 months now.
Yeah, if anyone knows of any, give us a shout.
This is a public call out.
Exactly. Kathleen McNamee, you'll find her on Twitter. So yeah, it's one of those where none of those fans can stay up, really.
No.
And even if you can find somewhere, it's remarkably expensive.
So expensive. So
unless you're a Dublin-based fan or even Leinster from one of the surrounding counties and you can drive home afterwards, it's very, very tough to be an Irish fan for an 8 o'clock game against Australia.
It's just a bit of a trek.
Isn't it? For a game like this, of this magnitude, a 3rd November International Series game against the Aussies, I mean, it should be a cracking game. But it's just not been made easy. Now, of course, they have their reasons for 8 o'clock kickoffs. I was impressed by the ground staff last week as well. When you consider, we had the Fiji game, we had Aisling O'Reilly and Andy Dunn at the game at the weekend for updates. And the following day, Aisling was back with Graham Gartland for the FAI Cup final in the Aviva Stadium. Yeah,
I saw a lot of people giving off about the pitch, but I actually thought they'd done a pretty decent job. Yeah. I think maybe people were more angry with the IRFU for putting a match on the day before the Cup final.
Yes.
I think maybe that was more than actual anger at the ground staff, but I expected it to be a lot worse, because it's a heavy beating for a pitch between 3 rugby matches. You've got the FA Cup final. We also have Ireland-Norway on Thursday.
Yeah.
And it's different sports as well, which require different grass and
completely,
different lengths and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, the ground staff have earned their wages over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it's not an easy one, and I know it's an issue that's come up in the NFL as well. Is that pitches? There's a mixture of real grass pitches and fake grass pitches, and all this, the effort that has to go into changing pitches for different matches. YouTube, someone says the bucket hats are a nod to the Stone Roses and Oasis. Lads, I'm 23 and I know that. What's the story like?
Well, see, I think that's probably why, because most people that I see wearing them are kind of...
At that age?
Yeah.
I mean...
I know I'm only 3 years older, but I feel like it's enough to bridge the gap.
Yeah. We're getting given out to...
Although maybe because like it is Stone Roses and Oasis, they're not exactly young people's bands, so maybe we're just very culturally inept.
Potentially. Sorry for not knowing my history of bucket hats.
But thank you for educating us. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, that's the important part.
Zed Leppelin.
Thank you for your comment as always, and keep the comments coming in on the YouTube, Facebook and Twitter streams as well. 8:44 on this Tuesday morning on OTB AM. It is time to say a very good morning to Mike Carlson. Morning, Mike.
Good morning. Stone Roses and Oasis. Now, those are kids' bands to me.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about the history of bucket hats, because these bucket hats have really... They've made a comeback at festivals, Mike, so I don't know if you're a bucket hat man or not, but certainly they've gone up in popularity.
I'm back from the cheesehead days, you know.
Oh, of course. Even better. We figured it'd be a good time, Mike, to check in. We're, I think, technically into the second half of the season now, in the terms of the NFL. Lots of the games this weekend. I know before last night's games, even 11 of the 13 games finished within one score. And there have been 115 such games in the season so far, the most through 10 weeks in NFL history. A lot of tight matches. And the Minnesota Vikings versus the Bills, we should start there. So the Vikings coming from 17 points down to get this thrilling 33-30 overtime win over the Buffalo Bills. What a wild game this was, Mike.
It was. I mean, it had a lot, and it kind of typifies the season that we're in, because there were a lot of fantastic moments, especially Justin Jefferson making this one-handed catch where the defensive back who's on his back had two hands on the ball and he had one hand on the ball, and somehow he managed to come down from about 3 feet in the air with the ball and possession. That was, maybe the catch of the season so far. But the game was actually decided on some very bad plays. Buffalo not taking a field goal when they had an easy chance at one with a 4th and goal at the 2, which would have extended their lead to 30 to 17 at the time and made the rest redundant. And then, of course, they had the game won. All they had to do was convert one play from their own 1 yard line. Josh Allen doing a quarterback sneak. The exchange got bobbled, and Minnesota recovered that for a touchdown, which tied the game. So this season has been a mix of the fantastic and the very mediocre kind of play. And, we thought we had settled down to maybe 3 or 4 teams that were actually really good, and they're all mostly having trouble now. The big story last night, is why I'm so bleary-eyed right now, is that Philadelphia got beaten by Washington. Their undefeated season is over. But, Minnesota, no one really believed in. They didn't really deserve to win that game. They tried hard to lose it. Buffalo's a very tough team to beat at home anyway. But the Bills tried a little bit harder in the end to give them the victory and what was, as you say, the game of the season, at least until last night.
And I suppose before the season started, the Minnesota Vikings weren't really a team that were on anyone's radar massively, but they go now to 8-1 for the season, and I guess the way in which they're getting some of these wins, Mike, a lot of comebacks like it was at the weekend, a lot of tight wins as well. That's the hallmark of champions.
Yeah, and they have played well in the sense of not turning the ball over a lot until they turned over 4 times against Buffalo. Keeping themselves in games situationally. They get a lot of mileage out of Justin Jefferson. They haven't had as much out of Adam Thielen as they'd like. And I think with Cook, you saw last night, they would like to be a running team, and he had an 81-yard touchdown run, but otherwise he didn't have anything. But that one big explosive play is the kind of thing that can win games for you. And the one thing that we're seeing, I think, this year is that there are precious few top quality quarterbacks left. You've seen an awful lot of regression from the people who you assume are at the top, the Aaron Rodgers, the Tom Brady's, Matt Stafford, who kind of vaulted up there a little bit because of the Super Bowl win last year, but and had a very good season, but he's reverted back to kind of Detroit, Matt, because he's not getting much support there. Russell Wilson in Denver has not done what was expected. Dak Prescott didn't play all that well against Green Bay for Dallas, and until some of these quarterback situations are resolved, those teams which were supposed to be pretty good and contenders are down in this level sort of averageness, of mediocrity, where any team can beat any other team, and you're going to see, I think, maybe it's the NFL's dream, a level of parity where a lot of teams will be going right up to the last weekend of the season to squeeze into the playoffs at 9-8, maybe 10-7 if they're lucky.
What do we say about Josh Haaland now, Mike? Because at the weekend, you're looking at some of his stats, especially red zone stats. I saw some people online certainly pointing that out, that even this season he's thrown 12 touchdowns and 3 interceptions from inside the 20, on track for his fewest passing touchdowns in the red zone since 2019. And then you talk about interceptions. He had thrown before this season just 2 interceptions in the red zone his entire career, and he's thrown a pick in the red zone in each of the past 3 games. So what's happening to Josh Allen, especially when they get into that red zone?
Yeah, and that was the play where they passed on the field goal, and he threw the interception on 4th down. As you said, last year he was a red zone marvel. Between running and passing, he was incredibly efficient. People are saying he's got an elbow problem that's hurting his passing, which might be true. There may not be as much velocity on the ball as there was. It's hard to tell when you're watching on television, but it seems to be more a decision-making basis. The offense in the red zone has running problems. They traded away Zach Moss, who they had drafted to be their kind of big bell cow, inside power runner. And Allen's really their best option in there, running the ball as well as passing it. And it's hard in the red zone because your space is limited, so that your receivers have less room to do what they want to do. You have less time once you kind of show a run to get to the outside where you can get one-on-one on the back. So I think it's partly a Josh Allen problem. I think his decision-making has been different this year, not as good. But I think that's also a reflection of the fact that the offense, as is the case with a lot of teams now who play more or less what we would call a single wing offense, the old-fashioned pre-T formation thing, which is where everyone was in shotgun all the time, but it was a run-oriented shotgun kind of offense. And you see more and more teams are playing this all the time. And, you might even say that when he fumbled that snap from center, maybe he's not taking enough snaps in practice with his center, because most of it comes from 7 yards back when he's taking the ball in the air, not hand to hand. I think it's a really, we're in almost a transitional period, I think, in the NFL. And one thing you saw this weekend was that teams who could control the ball were beating teams who were more explosive. That's what Washington's formula was last night against Philadelphia. In the first half, they had the ball for 24 minutes, and Philadelphia had the ball for 6 minutes. If you've got a really good offense like the Eagles do, the best way to defend them is to just keep them off the field. If your offense can grind out first downs and use up a lot of the clock, even if you have to settle for a field goal at that point, you can keep them under control. And Washington led at the half. Philadelphia got back in the game. They really, were still in a position to win the game up until that there was a terrible penalty where Taylor Heineke took a knee. He was running to the outside, and then he just gave himself up rather than be tackled. And one Philadelphia player sort of half tackled him anyway and got a penalty, and that killed the game. But it was a great game plan by Washington. They executed it really well against what was supposed to be one of the best defenses in the league. Yeah,
that was a really, really good game last night. And you look at the NFC East situation now, and you still have the Eagles, of course, topping at 8-1, Giants 7-2, the Dallas Cowboys are 6-3, and the Commanders go, albeit still bottom, they go to 5-5 for the season so far. Like in that game, you talked about Taylor Heineke, threw for 211 yards, was quite impressive from that perspective, Mike. But the Eagles, turn the ball over so often. I think they turned the ball over 3 times in their first 8 games, and they turned the ball over 4 times last night alone. So it was one of those nights for the Eagles. That's basically it. Quez Watkins fumbled the ball on a pass where he was wide open. The ball wasn't that well thrown from Hurts. He had to go to the ground to catch it, but he popped right up to run. And then when he was hit from behind, he fumbled it. Dallas Goedert fumbled on a play where he was being basically brought down by his face mask, but that wasn't called. Hurts threw a bad interception, but they killed themselves. A couple of stupid penalties, turnovers, and against a team that's controlling time of possession, which is difficult to do, and you have to be able to turn it into points. That was the story of the game. We saw sort of the same thing in Germany,
where the Bucks finally were able to run the ball, which they haven't been able to do all season. They controlled the possession. I think it was 37 minutes to 23, more or less. And that basically kept Seattle in check for enough for them to win, despite only scoring 21 points. And I heard you guys were talking about fields. You know, there was a lot of adjustment trying to go on to the grass in Munich because, you know, like at Wembley or whatever, it's football grass, not American football grass. And it's very quick. It's a slick surface. The ball moves on a lot, and the players, you know, have to get used to that and not slide around. But, you know, in my mind, anything is better than artificial turf because the evidence is visible there. It's destroying players' careers week in and week out. And, you know, we really need to be playing on stuff cows can eat.
Yeah, for sure. And like that game in Germany, like Tom Brady, fairly imperious. And I mean, you look at the Seahawks before the game and you're thinking 4-game winning streak, they're coming into it in really, really hot form. But I mean, the Bucks, and I'm even looking at the games that the Bucks have remaining, so fairly winnable games against the Browns, Saints, Cardinals, Panthers, Falcons. Like you look at the fixtures, the 49ers and Bengals, you know, top defenses left on the schedule for the Bucks, but they really, really could go on a winning streak themselves.
Yeah, I think that's highly likely too. Their defense looked much better. It looked very slow in the past few weeks, but Vita Vea up front, the linebackers, they looked a lot quicker, and they're not going to have tough challenges. I think if they can run the ball, that's good. Also, Brady's starting to find a group of receivers to throw to. You know, some frustration there, but you know, he needs to trust people. And the interesting thing was, at 45, I'm starting to see at least that he's showing signs of age. And where that showed to me was that Brady's a master of, you know, checking one receiver, checking another receiver, checking another receiver, and each time moving a little bit to give himself time to throw and also to reset. The reset seemed to be taking a little longer. And there was a pass where if Gronk had been his tight end, if Rob Gronkowski had been playing, Cameron Brate, the tight end, was wide open down the middle of the field, classic kind of Gronk pass, and Brady, third look, reset, zipped the ball in, but in his resetting, he hadn't noticed that the middle linebacker was sliding over in front. So the ball being zipped in on a line drive was catchable for the middle linebacker. If he had stopped and floated the ball, it's a touchdown. But because he's taking that little bit extra time, I don't think he saw that. And I think this is just, you know, one of those effects of slowing down a little in a game that's incredibly fast-paced. You know, you have 2 seconds or so to make all those decisions in your head and then physically execute it. So, you know, all the sidelines issues about Brady and personal life and all that kind of stuff to the side, I think this may well be his last season.
So you're telling me the laws of biology apply to Tom Brady as well. Finally, the aging process is catching up on the robot himself.
Yeah, I've been worried about that one myself.
He's human after all. The other game that really struck me across the weekend, and there were a few quality fixtures, Mike, but the Colts 25 points to 20 win over the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, Josh McDaniels, a lot of talk about how he's getting on at Raiders at the minute. 2-7 start for them. And yet, you look at the comments from the Raiders owner, Mark Davis, after the match. He's doing a fantastic job, he said. He said Rome wasn't built in a day. I mean, does this go completely against the thoughts of the Raiders fans right now, or how do they feel, I wonder?
That's a good question, because I think there was a lot of misapprehension about the Raiders before the season, and I have to say I fell prey to some of it myself because they had made the playoffs last year. But when you looked down the roster, you know, the playoff bump might have been just the reaction to losing John Gruden, just like the win for Indianapolis may have been partly reaction to losing Frank Reich maybe and Jeff Saturday taking over. Apart from making Matt Ryan the quarterback again, I'm not sure what Jeff Saturday did to make the Colts win that game. The Raiders lost that game. They're not a talented team, and that shows up. In McDaniel's defense, without Waller, his tight end, or Renfro, the possession receiver, getting Devontae Adams doesn't do them a lot of good, because part of the point of paying a lot of money for a big number one receiver like Devontae Adams is that he has to draw double coverage. That makes life easier for your other receivers. If your other good receivers are injured, that makes life hard for your quarterback. They're awful on defense. Their offensive line has not played very well. They've been in games. It doesn't look like they're quitting. It just looks like they're not very talented. And, I'm sure they'll give McDaniels another season to try to work that out. It's funny because we were talking about at the beginning of the season, the AFC West had, it was the strongest division for quarterbacks. You had Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, and you had Russell Wilson joining Denver, and you had Carr in Vegas. Well, Carr hasn't been that great. Wilson's been terrible. Herbert has very little support with the Chargers, and Mahomes is probably the only guy there who's he's not even carrying the team, but he's playing really well right now. So that's one of the problems for Vegas in this season. I also just like to highlight a couple. Miami beating Cleveland easily with that 49er. Their new coach is ex-49ers. He's got two ex-49ers running backs who combined for 165 yards at like 7 yards a carry to help them do that. And Tennessee won again against Denver, despite missing about 5 starters. And I was saying to someone yesterday, you know that movie Invincible with Mark Wahlberg, where he plays Vince Papile? There's a game there where he shows up to play, and it's like in a school parking lot or something. They're having this. That's what every Tennessee game looks like. They ought to be playing with where the people drive their cars up to use instead of lights in the stadium and stuff like that. They just make the game so ugly and then manage to win it. I think Mike Vrabel ought to get Coach of the Year, and if he gets it, he ought to receive it in some kind of leather jacket with spikes sticking out of the shoulders or something.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. I like that anecdote. That's one way of describing it. Mike, great stuff. And of course, we had the emotional interview with Derek Carr after the match as well, which we can touch on again. But some really great stuff from across the weekend. Mike Carlson, thanks as always.
Oh, thank you guys. See ya.
Pleasure. Mike Carlson there with us on OTB AM, as he often is. 9:01 AM on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM as well. Brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio for you across the afternoon. From 1 o'clock, it's OTB Gold on the Wexford team of 1956. 3 o'clock, it's Dadcast. From 4 p.m, we have a career retrospective with Paul Flynn. At 6 then, it's OTB Gold as Joe meets Ruby Walsh. You can follow OTB across all our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the very best in the latest sports content. First, here is Louise Quinn speaking ahead of her 100th cap yesterday. Myself and Kathleen mentioned it, of course, and she got on the score sheet in that win over Morocco. We're back with the Republic of Ireland national team manager Vera Pauw after this.
Yeah, it just feels something that's can be very rare and a very kind of special occasion. It's stuff that you don't really think about. When I was even talking to Niamh about it last night, you don't really think about it when you're kind of going through your career, but when you start approaching the 90, you'd be like, okay, this could be something, that you'd like to have, achieved, that you've been able to kind of play for your country for 100 caps and hopefully more. And so it feels really special. It feels really special for, my family as well. It's, something they're really proud of. So they're making their way out to Spain today as well. So it's very nice for them. Yeah, originally there was nothing lined up, but I just feel like getting the group back together as soon as we could to kind of, still we're going to be buzzing until the World Cup and after it. But it's nice to kind of just bring us back together. Relive some memories, and then also just get back on the pitch again to kind of, we've literally everything now we're building towards the World Cup already, to think that we're tactically doing what we need to do and just start concentrating on that. I just think it's been lovely. We had to obviously leave each other quite quick the day after the game and get back to our clubs, and so just to kind of get the group back together, it's extremely special, and it's always special when we get together, and it's always fun, and it's one of just the most enjoyable places to play your football. So it's just been really, really nice.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports Rugby.
Do you know when you dream as a young fella, you want to play for Ireland, you want to play for Leinster, you want to play for the Lions? I never even dreamed of Captain Ireland.
What did you dream?
spuds, gravy, mother's Sunday roast. Just playing for Ireland, you know what I mean? It was never...
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
Yeah, approaching 9:05 on this Tuesday morning's OTB AM. Delighted to say Vera Pauw, the Republic of Ireland Women's National Team Manager, joins us on the line this morning. Morning, Vera, how are things?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you. A bit tired, but well.
I can imagine. You had a long evening. We heard from Louise Quinn there during the ad break. 100th cap, a centurion and a goal to match as well for her. Remarkable achievement for Louise, and what a leader I'm sure she is in that squad.
She is, and she's not the one who is in front of the group, but she's always in the middle of the group. She's a phenomenal person, a fantastic football player, and the way that she can focus is just an example for everybody. Whatever is around her, she can focus on her game, and she's always there for everybody. But on the pitch, in her task, she never fails. She never fails in her basic task. So she has shared a lot of her memories with the youngsters, and I think that is invaluable. And I'm so happy for her that at this very special moment she could score her first goal with her feet, actually, because usually she scores with her head. She's one of our twin towers, and she's a big threat heading, but now she got her goal with her feet.
Yeah, it was great to see her score with the feet for once. She's scored plenty of goals. I'm sure she's absolutely buzzing, and great for her family and friends as well. Fantastic achievement. So the 4-0 win, Vera, I know, look, Morocco were a team a lot further down in the rankings than the Republic of Ireland, but how do you feel ultimately about the performance itself? Because you started so brightly in the game, and then there was that kind of lull between those 2 goals and the other 2 goals.
Yeah, absolutely right. If you've been at such a high last month, and you see each other, you always have a fallback. That is natural. You cannot have the same tension as during those playoffs. So I was extremely proud the way we started. But then it surprised us that we were playing so well. And a few players were starting to do different things, running out of the position, going to the other side of the pitch. And then there comes 1 or 2 passes that they cannot give because the positioning, the team organization is not completely right. Hesitation comes in. And from that moment, the Morocco players smelt a chance to take over the game with some rough play. And we were not protected for that. That's not an excuse, because you will meet this at the World Cup also.
That's the thing, like that. Some of that rough play. I mean, you're probably quite used to certain players like Denise O'Sullivan and Katie McCabe becoming targets of teams like that when they're trying to pinpoint the playmakers and the really dangerous players. They're going to pinpoint those players, but it's probably a good lesson for the girls as well, in that, you know, getting used to playing really hardened, feisty teams like that can only be good for the World Cup.
Yeah, and especially to be able to keep your own standard up. If we would have kept our own standard up, they wouldn't even have had a chance to get to us. So I'm sorry. So they were actually putting it on themselves.
Mm.
And we've spoken about that at halftime. It went better in the second half, but the Moroccan players just came out to get after us. And again, sometimes you need a little bit protection. The yellow card of Katie McCabe was just a block. So it's unbelievable that all the other challenges were not sanctioned, and a block is then getting a yellow card. There wasn't even a foul. But that is life. That can happen at World Cup too, and you should not get provoked by it.
Of course, and she had some stud marks on her, I understand, Katie, after the game as well.
Yeah. The first half, the first moment that she got really angry, she said they stood deliberately on her arm. She said, I could have broken my arm, and you could see the studs on her arm. Is
that something that you're going to chat to the team about as well in advance of the World Cup? Like, I guess even though Katie did very well not to properly react, in the World Cup, that's going to be so important because you're going to have, you know, other teams trying to wind you up. You can't react because if you end up getting a player sent off or suspended for another game in the group, that's when you know, get into trouble.
Yeah, especially the moments that you don't expect it. And Nigeria can be like that. The other teams do not have the intention. But Nigeria, we know that they're very physical and very on the ball and very on your ankles. So you have to be prepared for it. And then in that sense, it's been a very good lesson and very good exercise for us.
And you've made the point as well after the game, Vera, which is quite interesting, that you know you get dragged down to a team like Morocco's level for that middle period between the two sets of goals, and is that in large part because you've played so many higher ranked teams that you're used to being the underdog and chasing games like that, but all of a sudden you're playing a match last night where you're the ones having to set the pace and the tempo.
Yeah, that is why we put this game now. We knew that we couldn't be playing our best game, but we agreed with each other. Every single one is going into it and trying to play your best game ever. That's the only way you can do. So we started fantastically. And then it's more like a surprise, like, hey, we can play. And what I said, and a few step out of, and that is because we're not used to having the ball more than the opponent. Step out of your basic task, out of your role, because they think we can do more here, which is then actually less, and it breaks the teamwork. So that's a huge lesson, and that is why we play these games now.
Really, really lovely moment seeing Aoibhinn Clancy coming off the bench to get her debut, and really special moment for everyone at Wexford Youth, but also back home in Limerick, I'm sure, for her as well. So that's something that I'm sure you'll be keen to do, is keep blooding these new young players, especially ahead of the World Cup.
Yeah, and Aoibhinn has a special quality. She's hardly losing the ball. She really needs to get it in a too crowded situation with all players around her. Would she ever lose it? And usually she doesn't even lose it then either. What she needs to learn is to play under higher pressure, and the only way to learn it is to be put in the games when possible. She's one of our high talented players, and we've seen everybody. We had a closed door game on Friday. We started with 11 different players, so every single player here has played at least 45 minutes, if not 90 minutes.
Okay, so you're getting the game time in. Like, do you expect, when you're looking ahead to the World Cup next year, Vera, do you expect many changes to the kind of core squad that qualified? Are there opportunities there for maybe a few players to stake their claim and get into the reckoning?
Yeah, a team is never fixed. It's always developing and is always getting to the point that the cutoff date, and at that moment the best players will be selected. There's a few players knocking on the door with Irish passports. We're looking into that. But they really have to be better than what we have, because this group has qualified, and if it's equal level, then of course this group has the advantage. But if a player is really strengthening the team, it is a World Cup, it is elite sport, it is top sport, then of course we will bring her in.
One area that surely is not of any concern whatsoever is keeping clean sheets at the minute, Vera, because a sixth in a row for Courtney Brosnan last night. I think the Swedish game maybe was the last time there was a goal conceded. Yeah. That must be really, really pleasing, the fact that you can keep the defence so watertight.
Yeah, well, yesterday we also had a little bit of luck in that. Sorry, for my caffeine. But yeah, it's amazing, because the longer you keep your clean sheet, the more trust we have to make the next step in our development. And the next step in our development is that we need to be able to keep the ball under high pressure. And we need to learn to keep doing that and to not change our individual plans on the pitch while doing that. And that's related to what I just said earlier. And the fact that we could get Morocco and we could play them, we didn't have an awful lot of choice, to be honest, because it was so late. Remember, we would not camp now because we had used all our money in June. So a credit to the FAI and our sponsors and everybody involved to make it happen that we could camp. And having this opponent, it's phenomenal, because you need to see each other after a high like that. You need to make your next step after a high like that, under the pressure of not being at a high anymore. And otherwise we would have had that in February, and that's too late. So extremely important camp for us in our preparation towards the World Cup.
A second international goal, I think it was, for Kyra Carusa last night as well, and a birthday goal as well, I understand.
Yeah, and it was a fantastic example of what we've been working on for almost 2 years now, getting the ball free on the wing, whacking it in between the defenders and the goalkeeper. And it was a Kira ball because she's so good in that, and to pick it up just in between the defenders and the goalkeeper. Fantastic for her, delight for the team, and a perfect example of the fact that training does pay off.
How do you approach between now and February, Vera? Is it time to get a bit of rest? Is there a little bit of time to, I guess, watch tapes of the Canadians and the Australians and the Nigerians? Or how do you plan to spend the next couple of months?
Yeah, all of that, of course. But the key thing will be individual meetings with the staff and the players. We have set already a plan, but the opponents are not all known yet. So we will send that out to the world as soon as it's ready. But we will have a good winter program for the Irish-based players. And with all the other players, we set some individual tasks and individual programs where needed. But they do go back to their clubs. And most of them are full professionals. So there's not much space to work on that. The thing is that everybody needs to know where she stands, what is her next goal, and what she needs to be working on to have the biggest chance to step on that plane to Australia.
Must be quite heartening as well to see the interest levels in the Women's National League here in Ireland at the minute. Like, you see the dramatic end to the title campaign with Shells and Wexford and Athlone all there and thereabouts. And then, of course, the FAI Cup final as well. There's just so much interest. And we've spoken about this before on the show, where you have the likes of Katie McCabe and Louise Quinn and Denise up on billboards, and Sky have done a lot of great things in terms of their publicity as well. But even in terms of the Women's National League, those interest levels seem to be skyrocketing.
Yeah, it comes from all angles. The FAI putting in all the effort to create all the facilities for us. Our great sponsor Sky, who, as you said, is so good in visibility and make people aware of who we are, what we're doing, what kind of team we are, standing behind us on the difficult moments, and creating an atmosphere of vibe, of future, of enthusiasm, and I think we both fit to each other so well. And then the fans coming out and seeing what we're doing and admiring what the players showing on the pitch and what they give back to the public. I think it's a whole package. The clubs that are buzzing and vibing, over 5,000 spectators in Telex Stadium at the Cup final is something that we could never dream of, and it's just exploding. The numbers of girls playing football doubled this year. It is just amazing, and it's up to us as professionals within the association, together with the clubs, to make sure that all the pathways are created, and where there's little gaps to fill that. And to use the momentum to make a huge step forward in the infrastructure of our sports. And we're working on that. We have working groups that, of course, work on the different tasks for the World Cup, but also towards football development and education. And a whole package is lying on the table. And latterly tomorrow, we have our next meeting about that.
Yeah, like we even spoke to Joey Malone, the Shelburne assistant manager, on the show, building up to that FAI Cup final recently, and he was talking about the need to turn professional and even have compensation, I guess, for Irish clubs in terms of losing their best players to whether it be England or America. It's tough for a lot of Irish clubs at the moment that when these really, really good players are sold, that there's no compensation like maybe there is in the men's game. So all of these things, I guess, need to be dealt with.
Yeah, but that is a complete different area, and there's people in the legal part in the FAI is taking care of that, together with the clubs. Mark Scanlon as head of the Leagues of Ireland. Those are questions for them, because I don't know where it stands, I don't know the implications, and I don't know how it can be achieved. But it is a very valid point that he made, because as soon as a talent is just getting a little bit above the average, she's pulled away out of the clubs.
Finally, you must be delighted to see I guess the impact that some of those young players coming in, like the likes of Abby Larkin, someone who again has another league title under her belt. So they're building up experience. She's so young, and yet really, really racking up experience at the minute.
Yeah, we are very careful with her, as you see. We don't throw her in all kind of situations that she cannot handle yet. You've seen yesterday how difficult it is under these pressures for her, but also she's so talented, and you can only grow by meeting those pressures. So we take the opportunity and we let the players grow. We had 6 debutants this year only, let alone the years before. So I think this team is just growing and growing and growing, getting better and better and better. The youth pathway is better. We get them in earlier in the elite centers. The development officer doing a fantastic job in nourishing them. Tom Elms is the one who is keeping everything together at Women's National League and taking care of the home-based players and the clubs. It is a good structure. And I think that with very hard work, it always pays off, and you will always make a step forward together. But the rate of development that we see now is something that we could only dream of. And let's embrace it, everybody. Step up a level. And with that, we also get all those major steps forward for the club and for the league that will come in. I'm sure that will come in.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Vera, appreciate your time. I know you've had a busy number of days over there in Mallorca, and I'm sure there's plenty of Irish fans listening in who are still looking for their tickets and their travel itineraries and details for next summer's World Cup. So congrats on what was a great 2022, and here's hoping for some great things over the next 12 months or so.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great stuff, Vera Pauw there. Thanks a million. The Rugby Ireland Women's National Team Manager. Excitement, Kathleen. I mean, we can.
Building. It's building.
It is. Let's just say the build-up is here already.
Very much so. Even last night watching the game, I know it was a bit of a dead rubber match. It wasn't all that exciting.
Yeah.
But I was kind of looking at the players and I was like, oh, who's going to be in the World Cup squad? What's going to be happening?
Yeah, it's starting already.
Googling flights to Australia constantly.
You're going over, are you?
Yeah.
You'll find a way.
I will find a way, some way or another. I mean, I can't not. Like, I've spent the last year specifically talking about this team, and even just before that, it's just so momentous. I do wish it was a bit closer. But what other excuse will I ever have to go to Australia and see women play football? I mean, it's incredible. No, I am very, very excited. And because I covered the Euros this summer, and that was my first experience of a proper big football tournament.
Yeah.
And just the atmosphere is so much nicer than going to some of the men's games where I struggle sometimes with that, because I feel if I just want to go to a game by myself, or I always feel like I have to bring someone with me, or bring a lad with me particularly.
Yeah.
And I just never get that around women's football, and it's just nice to go and concentrate on the football and not have to think about anything else. So
that's true. And the kick-off times, if I'm right in saying, for Ireland's group games, they're relatively okay for an Irish audience, aren't they?
They're not the worst. I think we're 9, 10 and 1 o'clock mostly.
Okay.
In the morning, and
so
then
9 a.m. is the earliest.
No, there could have been a 3 o'clock in the morning kick-off if we wanted, but for us, we're fine. So
we're lucky enough.
I was at one stage when I was not sure if I was going to be able to get to go or not, and thinking about the job we have here, where most shifts start around 6, 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
I was I'm just going to have to flip my lifetime table and put my work day at the end of my actual day and just spend my whole night up watching football.
Yeah.
Which isn't the worst way to spend a night either.
You'd be wrecked though. You'd be wrecked. You'd be sleeping during the day, no doubt. Someone has commented, John, where the hell is Stephen Kisby-Green? He backed South Africa to beat Ireland and he hasn't been on the show since the game. That's a very, very fair point.
Not only has he not been on the show, I haven't seen him since around the office.
I haven't seen him.
He's disappeared.
Stephen, where are you? Stephen Kisby-Green, this is a call out. Show your face once more, because
we'll be nice, we promise.
Yeah, it would be nice.
There was a running joke in the office last week, because every game that he went to, the team he wanted to win lost. So we're putting together a fund to send him to the World Cup next year, so that he can go to Ireland, South Africa, and just
just be the lucky charm for Ireland.
Yeah. Just make sure for us that
was
we get the win.
Yeah, because the South African cricketers lost in the T20 World Cup, and the rugby team just couldn't buy a win against Ireland or Munster.
Yeah, he was down at Munster as well, so.
Jesus.
Poor man.
He's had a tough time of it. It's a tough time of it. Yeah. Just looking at some of the the back pages this morning, like angry United talk to lawyer over Ronaldo. Close friend Ferdinand can't defend interview. I mean, when Rio Ferdinand is going after him as well.
Yeah, you know things are not good. This is actually something I just saw on ESPN there, where you're talking to Vera Pauw, that Rob Dawson has a piece saying that Erik ten Hag has had a meeting with the hierarchy in United and said that Cristiano Ronaldo should not play for the club again, which is interesting because now it's putting it on the club as well. Who do they back? Do they back Ronaldo? Do they back Ten Hag?
Yeah.
So yeah, he had a meeting with co-chairman Joel Glazer, chief executive Richard Arnold and football director John Mersha on Monday to discuss the fallout. They're, as the other article said, they're talking to lawyers now and taking legal advice about how best to deal with it. Sources have told ESPN a number of senior players are furious at the timing of the outburst, with parts of the interview first made public just hours after Garnacho had scored a stoppage time winner. Sources have also said that Ten Hag is still of the opinion that a fit and motivated Ronaldo can help his team during the second half of the season, when United hope to be challenging in 4 competitions, but he has told club bosses that he is not willing to sacrifice unity within the squad to accommodate him and is prepared to see him leave even if there isn't a replacement.
And I think there's no question that the club will take the line of Ten Hag, and whatever he wants will go, because that's the thing as well. You're like people like Richard Arnold and John Murdo, who you mentioned, they're the people who Ronaldo was pointing fingers at. He was talking about the sporting director and the chairman and all the rest, and it is Arnold and Murto who Ronaldo is sticking the 2 fingers up to here. The Glazers got a little bit of in the neck as well, but the Glazers he doesn't have to deal with. He probably has to communicate with Murto and Arnold and see these lads around Carrington and around Old Trafford plenty. So I mean, they must be seething. It's no wonder that they're talking about legal advice and stuff as well, because in terms of contract, like has he gone beyond the bounds of his contract? Who knows? That'll all come out in the wash.
I feel like he's definitely frustrated his contract, because he's made it a stage where like he can't work at United. Yeah, like it's untenable for him to work there.
I mean, Jesus. It's just it gets more bizarre the more you see, and now we'll obviously have to watch and see the full interview and see what comes out of it. But Piers Morgan's just licking his lips at all this. This is just the publicity he's getting from it. But Ronaldo, I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen, we spoke about it at the top of the show, for anyone who hasn't seen the Bruno Fernandes Cristiano Ronaldo handshake as they're coming back into the Portuguese camp last night, I assume it was, please have a look. It is fantastic. And it's hard
to avoid this morning, in fairness. If you're on any
everywhere.
Form of social media, it's literally everywhere. I think it's up on like a couple of million views now.
Yeah, Jesus. Like Bruno Fernandes, he probably...
Shane's going to need to have a lie down after this conversation.
It's madness. Like, I was at Villa Park last week and Ronaldo's in the team, and you're kind of, you've forgotten about the Tottenham stuff. At that stage, you're like, well, okay, it's kind of all over with. He's handled the captain's armband for games as well, and it's all forgotten about. But the fact that he's come out and done this is, I don't know how he can have the discipline to talk about loyalty. How can you talk about loyalty when you go behind the club's back, doing an interview with Piers Morgan that you know is going to come out and cause complete chaos? That's the thing. He knew this was going to cause chaos, and Piers Morgan has said it himself. That's nearly what he's intending here, and the timing of it is no coincidence. He's doing this on purpose when he's off to Portugal. Now, if he does happen to be, I think Portugal play a friendly this week in the window before in the World Cup warm up match, and if Ronaldo is man of the match, there's of course the post match interview with the man of the match, as there usually is. Very interested to see if he speaks.
Yeah, but it is also the right sort of chaos, because it's not sort of chaos where he's going to lose sponsorship over this, or he's going to lose any brand deals. You know, it's not great what he said, and it's disrespectful, and it's everything else, but it doesn't really put his income massively, well, his United income, but I don't even think it's really about that for him anymore, to be fair.
It's just the headlines are so like, you have betrayed us. United want Ronaldo sacked for breach of club rules after a savage TV interview. That's the thing, like, what are the club rules? We don't really know. I'd assume going behind the back and doing an interview like that is not within the club's remit or the rules.
A lot of the time, don't they have like fines for that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
But I don't, like, this is probably a step above what many people have done before.
It is the type of thing that he almost can't play for the club again. Like, if he was to play, it's at the point now where if he was to play at Old Trafford again, what is the fans' reaction going to be like?
Love to know.
Like, I don't think the fans would appreciate this whatsoever.
No.
So we'll be very interested to see. I think it would.
But they'd have to do a massive PR campaign, and it would have to involve United hierarchy and Ten Hag and Ronaldo all sitting down and be like, yeah, we're all buddies now. We've sorted it out behind closed doors. He said he's sorry. We said we're sorry. Move on. Which I just don't see happening.
No, can't see it happening. We'll keep an eye on it across OTBAM during the week. It is 9:29 a.m. on this Tuesday morning. OTBAM brought to you live with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mow. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. That is all we have time for on this morning's show. If you missed any of it, of course, you can get the podcasts in all the usual places, the OTB Sports app and the Spotify and Go Loud. And of course the YouTube videos will be up in the usual spot, youtube.com/off the ball. Back tomorrow from 7:30 in the morning once again. Jimmy Heaslip will be joining us to look ahead to Ireland's clash with Australia. The ex-jockey turned nutritionist Evan Daly will be with us as well, plus plenty more besides. Enjoy, we'll chat to you tomorrow. Good luck.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mows.